Welcome to Proles of the Roundtable.
Welcome back to Proles Pod.
Hello and welcome to Proles of the Roundtable, where we sit down, have a few drinks, and talk Marxist history. Check out our website at prolespod.com, where you can find our back catalog, links to all the resources we talk about, and a whole communist ebook library, along with a few recipes. If you want to extra support us, check out our Patreon, where you can give your hard-earned wages to some prole-ass Marxists in exchange for bonus episodes, clothes, and content. Find out more at patreon.com/prolespod. We wanted to thank this episode's primary sponsor, who helped us buy a giant metal Lenin head from the former Soviet Union. So big thanks to our sponsor, Revisionism.
Yay!
Awesome. So today we have with us some very special friends of ours. Thanks for coming on.
Hi,
boys.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're happy to be here.
We have the Marx Madness twins on here, Nathan and David. So yeah, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us what you're drinking.
Yeah. So I'm David. I'm having well water out of a recycled V8 jug because I'm just that kind of guy.
Yeah, we're real spicy there. I'm Nathan, and I am as anyone who has listened to our show can guess, I'm just drinking white Monster energy drinks, just pure into my veins, because I'm broken inside and I want diabetes.
Anyone who doesn't believe the into his veins, we'll take a picture of the IV and then just send it.
It's real bad, but yeah. So a little bit of white Monster and some Dr. Thunder, because I quit drinking a couple weeks ago, and this is fun. This is fun.
Wow.
It was a real good. No, it's not nice, because I picked the worst time in the history of time to do it, because then I had to read this monster tome that consumed my life, and alcohol would have made the last half of it more bearable.
All right. Who else do we have at the table?
My name is William. I am drinking water because I have to be a responsible boy and go to work after this.
I'm Savannah. I'm drinking mango bubbly right now.
Wow.
Nice. Fancy. Hey, this is Alex. I'm drinking Bourgeoisie, Tears, and Automation by Bristol Brewing.
Very nice. And this is Justin, and I am drinking Grapefruit Kettle Sour IPA from Bonfire Brewing. That is so fancy.
That's a nice label.
Yeah, it's a little extra. Yeah. All right. So a couple things at the top of the episode. So we wanted to do an episode on Black Bolshevik. It's a book that is no longer being published, and the only copy online is a really terrible 2-page scan of the book, which we will link until we can do better. However, we understand also that a lot of people struggle to read online or on digital platforms, and so what we wanted to do was, because this book is fairly expensive, because it's out of print and there's only a handful of copies, and his widow, him being Harry Haywood, his widow republished the book under a different title and cut out like 350 pages from it. So
thanks, Revisionism.
Yeah, so that's big shout out to our sponsor, Revisionism, for that one.
I gotta wonder because I haven't found the edited version of it yet, so I really want to go back and find what 350 because there were a couple times where I'm like, okay, this might be not necessary, and then almost every time it came up and ended up being necessary. So I really I'm intrigued by her editing style. I want to figure out if it's all just every other time he was married before her, and this is some real petty level shit, or if there is some ideological revisionism, because his last widow who he had his son and daughter, Dr. Rebecca Haywood with, that was the other impetuous to this show was I didn't listen to the Rev Left episode with Dr. Hall until after I finished the book last night at 11:30, because I don't do things until there's a deadline. And it was really, really interesting because that title of that episode is Black Bolshevik, and they spend almost no time talking about this book at all. Yeah. And that's a real disservice because this is one of the most as someone that reads books semi-professionally, this is probably one of the most engaging and elucidating works of Marxist theory and just practical history that I've ever got to read, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting how well it kind of understands not only the theory that we'll of course get into with Black nationalism in the Black Belt, and what happened in the CPUSA in the United States, but it does a really good job of defining and showing and taking you kind of inside white chauvinism, and then how at the end that was kind of incorrectly weaponized to forward white chauvinism itself, which is something we can certainly, see today with certain elevated token Black liberals and things like that.
Oh, it's just so fun.
Absolutely. This is one of the best books I have ever read.
Yep.
And I haven't even finished it. But yeah, the 350 pages that I've already read are some of the best 350 pages I've ever read in my life.
Yeah.
And it's more people need to know about it, hear about it, learn about it, study it. And so that being said, we bought 4 copies of the book, and we are going to give them out to you all.
Oh my God,
listeners!
That's awesome, guys.
And
this is the kind of mutual aid that comes when you have a Patreon, guys. Keep donating to it because they do good work with it for fun.
So what we're gonna do, because we didn't want to hand it out to patrons because that gates it behind money.
That's a fact.
And we didn't want to do like a share this whatever, because then that makes it seem like we're trying to boost ourselves, which we're not. So what we decided was that we're going to have a contest for a slogan. So Ethan is going to put up on our website a little form that you can fill in at prolespod.com, which will have your submission for a slogan. Or you can email it to us, prolespod@gmail.com, or DM us on any of our social media platforms. Your submission, we'll go through them. We'll put some up on social media. Everybody will vote on them. And the top 4 will all get copies. And then we will pick the one that we like the best of those top 4 to choose as our slogan going forward. And for those of you that are unsure, a slogan would be like Riff Tracks. Their slogan is, "We don't make movies, we make fun of them." That's a slogan.
I do love how we just explained slogans, and then we did it with Riff Tracks, which is just the whole thing is just solid. Like I do enjoy that the audience you guys have is so pure that the concept of marketing has not gotten to them, and they are inoculated from that concept, and it's wholesome.
We've never been advertised to. We don't watch TV. We just
this is
all
good.
stay inside.
This is very good.
We heard about the billboard things that they have outside.
I saw Mad Men one time. That's advertising, right? That's not true. I never watched that show.
Okay, so that now that that's out of the way, we already know what we're going to talk about because we've already kind of covered it. So yes, basically you felt like it was a disservice that this wasn't talked about more. So we wanted to do an episode on it. Marx Madness folks, their entire podcast is like an audio book with commentary, like yelling commentary. And
the best kind.
So they literally like read word for word through most books.
Guys, strap in because the 37 hours later we will have finished this episode.
Nice, I'm ready.
It took us a whole episode to read 8 pages one time. So
this is absolutely true. So what I did was I got them on to read a 700-page book and then talk about it for 2 hours. So let's do this.
Which is a weird sort of like punish. Like this is like putting me in a cage with a tiger and just one of us is going to die and I don't know who it is, but it's not going to end well.
All right. How do you guys want to swing this? I think
the easiest thing to do is, and me and David have kind of been doing this in chunks as we go. Yeah. Is we would kind of read in a chunk and recap, because the other thing we realize is that but we couldn't start reading it until we had like a hard deadline because we're both terrible at that. So let it be said that I was the comrade and let David read the physical copy of the book while I read all 644 pages on that garbage scanned in PDF on an iPad. So
Brutal.
that's the real service that I've done for the community today. I'd like to
Thank
be.
you.
I'd like a statue out front later.
That's how we'll remember you.
But I think the best way to do this is to kind of chunk the book up and kind of go through it. We go through things word by word. Our compromise is we will go chapter by chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too.
And
They're
so-
all titles, so it helps.
Yeah, they are titled. It goes through, and I've got highlights of key stuff. I will not obviously be able to get to all of it, but it's just so I can kind of jog my memory as we go. But so again, if we find that we're going too slow at the beginning, we'll try and speed up as we go and get through it. I can say the back half of the book, everyone that read like 350 pages or so, you got the best experience because that's the uplifting and the best stuff, and that's where I kind of want to start. So, David, I don't know how the fuck we're gonna play this game, but for now, I'm just gonna start talking.
Sure.
And you cut me the fuck off whenever you decide
All
I
right.
talk too much.
All right,
How's
we
that
can
sound,
do this.
buddy?
We got that.
Okay,
We got
cool.
that. Yeah.
Cool. So Harry Haywood was born in South Omaha on February 4th, 1898. I've now read the first sentence of the book. That's I realized this could get out of control.
Buckle down.
Harry Haywood was the son of ex-slaves.
Yeah.
So that's the bizarre thing too. And the nice thing when I was listening to Brett's episode with Dr. Rebecca Haywood, it is mind-boggling because she had her Rebecca Hall. That's right. She has a name that's not Haywood.
Yeah,
I should know
it's
that.
his name. He's Harry Hall. He took Haywood. when he
all right.
We'll get to that.
Way to point out that I forgot things, David. Thank you. This is a great start. She is a 56-year-old woman who is 2 generations removed from slavery.
Yeah.
It's
And
wild.
And that's
just-
fucked up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is fucked up. But like this man, so before we launch into it, he lived through like all of the major monumental shifts in like social change in the world, really. And he
for sure.
experienced most of them firsthand, which is fucking wild.
I mean, as
Like,
an
the life this man lived is incredible.
If you want a 10,000-foot view of if you needed just a blurb on this man, he son of ex-slaves who served in 3 different wars: World War I, World War II, and the Spanish Civil War. And then was studied in Moscow while at the Lenin School, and then was a founding member and active leader of the Communist Party of the USA during its heyday in the late 20s and 30s. If that's not like, holy crap, I need more on this man, because like that is again one of like most interesting man in the world shit. Like this guy is there at like every single event, and the on the ground stuff I think is what's most interesting. So again, David, from the early parts of his life, I mean, again, I don't want to cut anything, but it's a 644 page book. I don't necessarily want to get into the nitty gritty of everything. David, from the early parts of his life, before World War I, what do you think is important?
I mean, let's start at the setup. The setup is, of course, his father, and he goes in kind of into detail about his father. He calls him a Booker T. Washington type, one that
in a derogatory way.
Yeah,
in case you still like Booker T. Washington. I don't know anyone out there.
But kind of one of those like, we got to be nice to the white people and integrate into their culture type, right? And you got to be buttoned up, and you got to be good, and you got to show that you're the righteous black man that's been freed, and that kind of thing. And they're living in, I believe it was Omaha,
South Omaha, same birthplace as Malcolm X.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
South Omaha pumping out black revolutionaries. Good on you. Keep going.
And he talks about South Omaha being, I mean, the white people there are very friendly. He didn't really seem to feel too much racism early on. And, up in northern Omaha, they had some troubles, but the police, the white people, the schoolmasters, all there were pretty nice to him. And then things start heating up a little, right? And that's where you see, and this was the jarring thing about chapter 1, the only jarring thing.
Well, there's 2 jarring things. Are you talking about his grandpa Or are you talking about when they got run out of town?
When they got run out of town.
So the first one, the one thing that goes like prior to that, like in his past before he was born, was his grandfather. That he tells a story of when they had to leave town originally, and the clan, literally a Klansman, was coming looking for his grandma and grandpa.
Oh yeah.
And guy walks in the door, and his grandpa literally just shotgun blasts like he describes it, shotgun blast a Klansman's head clean off.
Hell yeah.
And praxis of the week right there, ladies and gentlemen, because it's just, you love to see it. And and so they had to leave unexcitedly, but that was the early part. And then he talks about, well, okay, yeah, we don't really see all this. And then that leads to David's thing. Because again, he talks about this kind of idyllic little, normal early American life. And then
right, everything seems nice, everything's good. And then all of a sudden his father just burst in. And I believe it was kind of late in the day.
Yeah.
And so they're totally unprepared for it. Burst in, we got to go. We got to get out of town. We got to go. And they're like, what are we talking about? We just paid off this house. We're living here. We've established this life. No, screw the house. We got to go.
Yeah.
Right.
And the inciting incident of this is just, it's not like we got to go. I just committed a heist and we've got like a bag full of diamonds. Let's get out of town and go live our. No, it's just some racist ass white guys came and said, hey, if you beat the shit out of his dad and then said, hey, if you don't leave, we're going to kill you and your family. And his dad, again, there's flight or fight. It's going to kick in there. I'm not denigrating the man or anything like that. But in this instance, he said, fuck it, let's go.
Yeah.
But again,
which seems fair because it was kill you and your family.
Exactly.
Right.
And he, if he fights and he dies, fine. But how's he going to defend his family at that point?
Exactly.
Right.
But then you've also got, it just is such, because they had someone stay behind and try and sell the house. But you want to try and explain to fucking racist ass white people nowadays why systemic racism is actually a huge deal on a socioeconomic basis, and how again, imagine most human beings in America right now, their largest asset, if they have one, is their house. Period. That's the asset that you have.
If you're lucky enough to
enough to own a house. They were lucky enough to own a house, owned it, paid it off, and then had to walk away from it. You want to understand how wealth was racistly distributed throughout our country, like how racism absolutely materially affected everyone. And this is not that long ago. We're only talking like 1.5 generations back at this point. There's not enough time for that to have corrected itself. So fucking let's pay some reparations, I guess, is the moral of the story today. Yeah. That's chapter 1. Chapter 1, title, pay some reparations, motherfucker. Yeah. Moving on to chapter 2.
Now there was one little detail.
No, there wasn't.
Too.
We've moved on, David, and fastest.
His brother Otto, right? So Harry's older brother Otto is kind of getting into some revolutionary stuff, and his Booker T. Washington type father doesn't like it so much, and that's just set on the back burner.
Yeah, it's our Chekhov's gun of the chapter.
That's right.
Hey, maybe some revolution will come up in this book about the communist leader of America. No big deal. No. So then we jump to chapter 2, and hey, we're going to World War I, guys. Who here doesn't know what happened in World War I? Anybody? No? All right, let's skip almost all of this chapter then, because at the end of the day, I'm sorry, it's like the last before things actually start getting good. Long story short. Yeah, no, go ahead.
I don't think that that's actually true, because
no, you're right.
The way
I was being very, very facetious.
But although I think that the most interesting segments of that chapter are before he actually ships off, when he talks about how by this point he's a young man. He's experienced racism firsthand in that he gets fired from jobs constantly. He gets shit talked all the time. People threaten to beat his ass. All that kind of stuff. Lynching is still legal. But they, when they go to war, they create a black regiment because the whites don't want to fight with the blacks. And so they take this train through the Bible Belt into Houston, I believe, is where they end up for boot camp. And every stop along the way, they would take their entire regiment into a shop. They'd ask the shop owner for stuff. And if the shop owner was a little bit racist, which most of them were, they'd beat their ass, break everything in their shop, and then steal it and go back to the train and then go to the next stop.
As you do.
Go out, beat some white people's ass, steal some stuff from the store, go back to the train. And they actually pulled a gun on a sheriff one time during this trip. I mean, it was some
it's just like girls' night out every Friday.
It was very much like, oh, no, you don't understand. We got military uniforms on now, so you can't mess with us. We are going to take ours.
And they were only there for like 45 minutes to an hour, so there's no time for people to like gather a mob to like go lynch them, which is what would have happened.
And now the one shitty thing about that is you heard a couple times, and again, I think it just goes to, I think this went to Haywood's mentality as he evolved as a thinker, but he heard like, oh yeah, the black people that were left in that town after we left were going to get hell for what we like. This was going to trickle down somewhere. Like white people ain't just going to take it laying down because they're white people. We're bad.
Right.
But there's one. So the first, when we get to Europe, the striking thing to me, and because this was anytime there was like just a wild history fact that I don't know, because that's basically, spoiler alert for Mark's Madness, that's about half of the show is Nathan learning basic facts about history that he should know and didn't. Great history degree you've got there, Nathan. This is really, I should get a refund on it. I really should.
Shame if we debunked all of it.
Yeah. But the secret, did anyone know about the secret information bulletin concerning Black American troops? Because apparently
it was fucking wild.
Yeah. Apparently it was notorious at the time Haywood wrote it. I had never heard of this. They didn't teach this to me during AP World or U.S. History.
I had never heard of it either.
So I'm going to read it. This is one of the few times it's not one of the few times. It's going to happen a lot. It's all I'm good at, guys. But I'm going to read this verbatim. It is important for the French officers who have been called upon to exercise command over Black American troops or who live in close contact with them to have an exact idea of the position occupied by Negroes in the United States. In the increasing number of Negroes in the United States, about 15 million, would create for the white race in the Republic a menace of degeneracy were it not that an impassable gulf has been made between them. Although a citizen of the United States, the black man is regarded by white American as an inferior being with whom relations or business service are only of business or service only are possible. The black is constantly being censored for his want of intelligence and discretion, his lack of civic and professional conscience, and for his tendency toward undue familiarity. The vices of Negroes are a constant menace to the American who has to repress them sternly. For instance, the Black American troops in France have by themselves given rise to as many complaints for attempted rape as the rest of the army. So one, that last sentence was 100% false. They went into a little thing later where they're like, yeah, no, that got completely debunked in like 2 minutes. That was an official letter from the U.S. military to the freaking French forces in World War I. They literally had to send them a letter and go, hey guys, I'm not sure if you're aware, but black people aren't really people, so please don't be nice to them.
Please don't be nice to the black people.
This is not wild. This is not like subtle racism. This is explicit. Yeah. Do not take our slaves and make them think they're people, please, because that would cause a lot of issues back home. Right. I mean, I'm literally reading.
Fuck that.
And that was well known. That's just like a well known thing that existed in the world, and I had never heard about it till now.
It wasn't well known to the black troops while they were over there. It was something, of course, they found out when they got back. But pretty well now, it's well known. It's just not taught.
Yeah. And then it's the other line that I highlighted because it absolutely should. I mean, it rings true all throughout history, but disgruntlement was often voiced in a now familiar form of, what are we doing over here? Germans ain't done nothing to us. It's those crackers we should be fighting. While we were lined up in the square one day, our captain took the occasion to comment on these sentiments. Well, he said, I've been hearing all this stuff about you guys saying we weren't going to fight the Germans. Well, we certainly can't make any of you fight if you don't want to, but I'll tell you one thing, and all we can do is take you up to the front where the Germans are, and you can use your own judgment whether to fight them or not. So again, there was race conscious, if not class, there was definitely race consciousness in these battalions. They understood this wasn't some like, we're going to serve America because we want to. It was, for a lot of these people, it's the same thing you see with almost, most people that get in the military. It's, I have to do this because, and especially then draft and everything else, it was an opportunity to get out of their particular situation. But there was no illusion of like patriotism among this battalion from what I could gather.
Right.
Just get through this and get out.
Yeah, exactly. He wasn't radicalized at this point, so he was just kind of going through the motions.
Yes.
Yeah. Which was interesting because that sounds like something Lenin would be telling the troops.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was absolutely.
Harry Haywood had no idea who the hell Lenin was at this point.
Yeah, they had revolutionary defeatism down before they knew what the fuck revolutionary defeatism was. They were on this.
Yeah. There was actually a black soldier that they came up on when they were traveling through France, and it turned out it was this huge lynch mob that the Americans had basically done in front of the French, like, this is what you do to black people, to try to show them that. And when they came through and heard about this, the French people were like, we don't know why they did that to that man. We don't see any reason to do this. And that's when Haywood was really like, these are really not the battles we should be fighting.
No.
Right.
But I also, and again, I think I skipped that. They make out like the French to be, they weren't racist. I think everything is relative. I think this highlights
I don't
how
think we're reading Fanon right now. It's hard to say the French
Exactly. I was about to say exactly. Like, it's like, the French are, again, coming from, I think it shows the gulf of how extreme Jim Crow and de facto, post-Reconstruction racism was in America. But I never want to give the French the benefit of the doubt that they were not somehow racist fuckheads, because they absolutely were at this time. Because Algeria was a thing.
Yeah.
So, searching for answers. This is where I think the book kind of started getting its steam underneath it, because Harry started trying to get into that whole communism thing. And we all know why we're here for this book, and it's the whole communism thing. David, searching for answers, go.
Yeah. So on Searching for Answers, this is kind of in when he's on that with the Wolverine train, I think they called it, that went up from Chicago through Michigan. And he's getting fired.
Is that the one that had Swayze on it? Was Swayze on that one?
God. Shut up.
No, just me. Okay, all right. No Red Dawn references for anyone else. Just this guy. All right, fine. I'll just go sit in the corner.
No, you don't get your references today.
Nope. Fine. No, it's fine.
But anyway, so in this chapter, he's talking about he had met back up with Otto, and Otto was like, hey, buddy, or I guess that's a little later in the chapter. I'm probably jumping ahead, aren't I?
You probably are. So all right, all right, we'll jump ahead.
Okay.
He's serving on trains. He's coming back. He comes back post World War I. He had he had endocarditis in World War I. He was treated in the hospital, so he had and they kind of hand waved it off and said, no, you don't really have a disability. You're not. There's no big deal, whatever, and kind of passed it off and moved on. But he's realizing, again, he's a man that is about to become a communist, and therefore he doesn't take shit. That's a thing he'll learn for his whole life. So he realizes that I'm moody. I was restless, moody, short-tempered, qualities ill-suited to a trade. Naturally, I had trouble holding a job. My trouble was not with guests. So he didn't, when he's working in the restaurants, so much with his managers. He had problems with his bosses. Again, good idea that you're going to go left there when you figured that part of it out. But it's just, it's a lot of, I think the first sentence, what was it, page 98, was when he finally got up with Otto, because he was reading Darwin, he was reading Nietzsche, doing that thing that every budding intellectual does, which is read garbage neoliberal shit for a while.
And he was in Chicago, and he goes in Chicago, this is where the Haymarket affair happened.
We all familiar with Haymarket? We need to explain Haymarket. We can skip the Haymarket affair, right?
We can skip the Haymarket affair.
Okay, just making sure. I got to know. I don't know. I didn't know about the Paris Commune when I started things. Okay, I can't assume anyone knows anything anymore.
Yeah, but he was talking about the Haymarket affair. He talked about the Pullman strike, which I thought was hilarious because he called it Eugene Debs and his radical but lily white American Railway Union.
Yeah, you really enjoyed him calling Eugene Debs lily white.
It was great.
I mean, it's fun. I enjoy it, but then you get the turn point. Our acceleration here is talking to Otto, and Otto says directly, you ought to quit reading those bourgeois authors and start reading Marx and Engels. And if anyone's got an air horn, now's the time to drop it, because this is where shit happens. There we go. There we go. Okay. Yes. He also said he should read Henry Louis Morgan's Ancient Society, but I didn't have any time to figure out what the fuck that was. And I've never heard of it, so I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
as is my want. So Otto and I, he goes back, and then we talk about you talk about his friend Parker, who, again, just there's a big trend throughout this book of he will build this person up through a paragraph or two, and I think it really hits home. But he builds up these individuals that he talks to who could have been great, had the theory, had great practice on the ground, and his friend Parker was one of those guys. And then the last sentence of that particular paragraph was, "This brilliant young man returned to Omaha to resume his studies. The next winter, he was dead. We heard it was the result of a mental breakdown, and thus his short career was cut short." Basically, he could not reconcile being a black man in America at the time, was the theory, and ended up killing himself, which is great, because that really just sets the tone for the rest of this. And then guys, we get to Garvey, and let Lee tell you, Harry Haywood has no time for fucking Garveyism, even a little bit.
He spends like at least the first half of the book just like constantly harping on Garveyism, but from a materialist standpoint, he doesn't just talk shit.
Sure.
No, it's not like Lenin style, just like personal dunks on guys. Now, do not take that as a bad thing. Those are good and they are amazing, and I will hear nothing against them. My whole show is based around them at a certain level.
Trotsky's written a silly letter. We will neither read it or acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Shit.
Classic.
Yeah, we had one of those. We had that on Twitter this week. It was fun. It was very much so. Again, Garveyism, for anyone that didn't know, that was the original, the Back to Africa movement. It was this concept of we're going to ask the government to peacefully pay for us to please go back to Africa and settle a colony over there.
I remember that.
And recreate all of capitalism, but we just want to be the masters this time, please, pretty please. But that was more subtext than said out loud.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird idea, because it's
I remember
almost like
learning about this in. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Oh no. You go ahead. I was just gonna say it's almost like
Please make us not have to talk. Please.
It's almost like a Zionism where nobody in the equation is white, but there's still very clearly settlers to come over and take over the area. It was, and he recognized it immediately. It's very, very bourgeoisie.
Right.
Yeah, the idea of like millions of black people going to colonize Africa is fucking yikes.
Well, and the thing that should tip you off that it's really fucked is that a lot of white people supported it. They're like, oh, yeah, just have the black people go to Africa. They'll go back to their home because they totally belong there. It's like, wow, fuck this.
Yeah,
They've been removed by so many generations.
Yeah,
like,
they have nothing in common culturally.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, and you want to talk about culturally? That's going to be a huge theme of this book, and that's why the Garveyism thing is important, because the intellectual struggle for what is the correct answer for black people in America is essentially like that is the thesis statement of this book. I think if there's one grand contribution that Haywood made to theory, at the very least, it was on how do you define the African American question in America in a Marxist Leninist sense.
It's not just an autobiography, this book. It's an autobiography / history book / theory book, because he intertwines his theory constantly, because he wrote a bunch of like essays and articles and books on his theory during this period. And as he's telling the history, he kind of walks you through the things that he went through developing his theory.
That makes sense, though. When you have an understanding within theory, you can look back and consider your life and how it fits within that theory. And I've done that a lot in my own life, too. Right. So that's really amazing.
It's why, and again, it's why I wish more, again, these sorts of autobiographies from the leaders. I mean, Haywood was lucky to have lived long enough and been in a position to write this book. But again, I want that Stalin autobiography, goddammit, and I'm mad that I don't have it. But when we go back to talking about white people supporting the Garveyism movement, and then kind of Garvey, that was a you scratch my back, I scratch yours thing, because you get to this quote where it's, who were the enemies of the black freedom struggle? While Garvey claimed the entire white race was the enemy, it did not escape us that he was inconsistent being soft on white capitalists. His main target was clearly white labor and the trade union movement. According to Garvey, it seems strange and a paradox, but the only convenient friend the Negro or worker or laborer has in America at the present time is the white capitalist. Just no. The capitalist being selfish, seeking only the largest profit out of labor, is willing and glad to use Negro labor whenever possible on a scale reasonably below the standard white union wage. But if the Negro unionizes himself to the level of the white worker, the choice and preference of employment is given to the white worker. If the Negro takes my advice, he will organize by himself and always keep his scale of wage a little lower than the whites until he is able to become, through proper leadership, his own employer. By doing so, he will keep the goodwill of the white employer and live a little longer under the present scheme of things. So there are two reasons I read that whole thing like that.
Yeah. One is you should die a little inside with every word.
One is I read it and so must you now. Two, anyone who is as big a masochist as me and was a shitty libertarian, and ever listened to Milton Friedman talk. David, I know I made you listen to him talk one time.
Yeah.
It was super fun.
Yeah, I still haven't forgiven you for that.
Yeah, we'll get to episode 2 of that fun miniseries later. That was literally line for line Milton Friedman's argument against minimum wage was that, oh, well, they'll never pay black people the same as white people. So if you get rid of the minimum wage, that'll make sure that black people can stay employed because you would never pay them the same as a white worker. So a minimum wage just forces them out. And the fact that a person who was ostensibly for black liberation is making the exact same argument as Milton fucking Friedman should kind of just expose on its face where we are and why this is not going to work long term for any serious leftist. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, and you look at the conclusion. Just look at the actual conclusion of that is like, you should make sure you take less money.
Yeah.
That way you can become rich someday.
Yeah.
And then you could be the exploiter. Hooray. You know, like,
yeah,
I mean,
just know your place and do what we say. And then, we promise this will pay off in the long run. Just listen to us. And that's bullshit.
No.
Right. I mean, you couldn't be more bourgeoisie. I don't care who he allied with, you know.
And you skip down a little bit, again, Still Searching for Answers. I found the theory behind this achievement all there. And again, he's talking about now the Russian Revolution and how they were fascinated by this in the United States because it's especially the African-American community because it was a liberating struggle. It's like, okay, shit, someone's actually doing it. How do we do this? And I found the theory behind this achievement all there and Lenin, State, and Revolution. And God, just yes.
Goddamn, hell yeah.
That sentence is immortal and will live on through all of history because all the answers are there. He developed and applied the theories of Marx and Engels on the role of the state and the dictatorship of the proletariat. This work was the single most important book I had read in the entire 3 years of my political search and was decisive in leading me to the Communist Party. And considering that was the moment that I went full on ML is when I finally read, which is weird because I spent 27 hours reading Capital and hadn't fully committed yet. That was a weird fun time. But yeah, no, State and Rev was the one that finally like locked me in and shot me into the canon of communism. I'm like, all right, cool. I can follow you, Harry. I see what you're doing here. I'm down. In his work, Lenin clarified the nature of the state and the means by which to overthrow it. His approach seemed practical and realistic. It was no longer just abstract theory. And that becomes really important because, again, especially the black community in America during this time did not want abstract fucking theory. They wanted hard, actual. They wanted what was actually going to work and what was real. And you're going to see this a lot because Haywood's just flippantly, almost to a certain extent, hand waves off things that leftists have been arguing about online for what feels like a millennium.
Because it's never been practiced.
Like, so... Yeah, and it's very much, and he also gets into things that again that we debate back. Oh, did this happen? Again, he's real and he's on the ground, and that's when we get to we get all the way to fun chapter 4, an organization of revolutionaries. David, anything to start with before I jump into highlights?
Yeah, I mean, I think we breezed by a little bit too much on something about the Garveyism.
I mean, probably, but I don't know how else to cover a 600-page book in less than a year. I clearly don't understand how to be concise. I don't know why you're trying to.
But something he talks about with the Garveyism is they were a little like he was right that their whole group, because they had a small group that they were working with. And this group was a little too isolationist, and I don't know if that detail is really necessary. But in that group, they kind of dismissed the Garveyism, and he said they dismissed it a little too much. Like they wrote off all nationalism of oppressed people because they could see through Garveyism. And he said he kind of foreshadowed that like he'll find out later that he was a little mistaken there.
Yeah. And that is another amazing thing about this work, and I do love it that Haywood is not right. It does not write and I was right all the time. Right. And here's all the times I was right, guys. Like he is super clear when he's wrong, when hindsight proves he was wrong, when he was, he self-crits constantly throughout this book.
He'll do an aside where he's like, and I was really wrong here. We made a huge mistake here. If we would have understood the revolutionary potential of nationalism that existed within the Garvey movement that just needed to be redirected, then we might have had an actual movement that we could have started 30 years earlier than like the real movement started.
Which is why books like this, I think, are super. I have my entire fake internet career is reading books of theory. So I obviously stand theory pretty hard here, but books like this, I think, are so great because they are showing I believe a lot in when Mao said that you have to fail to learn, like failure is an important part of figuring out how to move forward. And he covers so many practical failures that I think people just, that people are still talking about, like, well, what if we did it this way? And if you just read this, you go, oh no, they did it that way and it didn't work. And here's why it didn't work. Please don't make the same mistake we're making again. And spoiler alert, we're making all the fucking same mistakes they made again. Yeah, super fun. But yeah, so chapter 4 is when we first we kick into the Communist Party. We kick in the door and hey guys, there's communists. Are you aware? So we're in 22 now. So again, a couple years post October Revolution, Soviet Union's off and running. We're in that fun part of Hearts of Iron 4 where no other wars have started yet, but Hitler's starting to look antsy over there, so you got to kind of be careful. And then he goes on. So there again, white chauvinism within the party is a huge trend throughout this book. And that gets this first little clip right here. Clearly, membership in the party, we're talking about the Communist Party, did not automatically free whites from white supremacist ideas, nor for that matter did it free blacks from their distrust of whites. Throughout my lifetime, I found that interracial solidarity, even in the Communist Party, required a continuous ideological struggle. And that, again, the idea of continuous ideological struggle. Haywood is a huge believer, I think, throughout this book in the idea that criticism and debate and a very, very robust dialogue does not show weakness. It shows that you're trying. And if you don't have that, the second that goes away and you just kind of like, no, this is the line and we're sticking to it, that's when everything starts falling apart.
Yeah, Haywood is a principled-ass Marxist-Leninist. Like,
didn't
he's a diehard, Yeah,
didn't he become a Maoist later? Or he was pretty big on Mao.
He was pretty big on Mao.
But that's not the same thing as being a Maoist.
Sure, yeah, that's fair,
Yes, he had great respect for Mao, and he had great respect for what Mao was doing in China at the time. I don't know if that would have changed.
There's some lauding of Mao later in the book,
which is fair. Is amazing.
Mao's lit.
Mao's Bay, we got it.
But that is something where, and this keeps coming back up with the white chauvinism. It's a big part of the book. Is Haywood's got this idea that white chauvinism is not something that is ever defeated in any one person. So every white comrade has it. Okay. But it's also not something that like disqualifies you from the struggle.
Canceled.
So it's not like, it's not like you got.
All right. From now on,
you got white chauvinism,
Alex.
you're out.
Sweet.
Prole of the round. Very lonely table.
We're just here to pass beers.
But then you get into, again, you had Garveyism, and then you have there's a new version of Garveyism, guys. We're going to do, it was called 49th stating, which was this kind of concept of we're going to form a new colored autonomous state in the Pacific Northwest. So before the Pacific Northwest became just wildly white supremacist, they were gonna do it the opposite way. And then it's America. We can't have anything nice here.
That's not
but the quote from that when they're quoting. So again, this is post 1917. This is after Woodrow Wilson and the 14 points. Freed Belgium. With what moral authority or justice can President Wilson demand that 8 million Belgians be freed when for his entire first term and the present moment of his second term, he has not lifted a finger for justice and liberty for over 10 million colored people, a nation within a nation, a nationality oppressed and Jim Crowed, yet worthy as any other people of a square deal or failing that separate political existence. And I think this is the first time that we really start getting into, because again, Garveyism, the concept of black nationalism going back to Africa, that was one thing, but this is the first time you start hearing this hint of
a nation within a nation.
Nation within a nation. An autonomous, the idea of an autonomous black, the African American right to self-determination within this country in some form.
Hell yeah.
And this is, again, you can see he immediately jumps on this. This is part of when he was a member of what was called the Black Brotherhood is the name of this organization?
Yeah, the ABB.
ABB, yeah.
Yeah.
And so they say, just as the Negro in the United States can never hope to win equal rights with his white neighbors until Africa is liberated and a strong Negro state or states erected on that continent, so too, we can never liberate Africa unless and until the American section of the Negro race is made strong enough to play the part for a free Africa that the Irish in America now play for a free Ireland. Got to get the Irish in there somehow for whatever reason. I don't know. Go Ireland. But the Brotherhood, they absolutely did not believe in this racial separatism. They didn't want to separate. They didn't want to separate from America and go back to Africa and say we're going to segregate ourselves. They wanted to say, no, within America, we are going to have our own autonomous zone that is still within the United States, but it's kind of ruled by us, which I think, is it this chapter that we get to Pepper's Soviet Republic of... like the African Soviet Republic. I don't think it is.
I don't think that's this chapter.
I don't think it's this chapter, but there, yeah, at a certain point they come up with this idea of basically having it was like a last ditch effort to save the party, and they wanted a Soviet, African Soviet States of America sort of thing, where it was like a separate SR just in the South, down in the Black Belt.
Sounds amazing.
And I'm like, oh my God, that'd have been so good.
Yeah. Now, of course, I mean, this is something where Haywood's still taking this in. He still hadn't totally bought in on the national question, and we'll get into that with Moscow. But something I feel like
oh man, guys, when we go to Moscow, it's so good.
Yeah. It's the best reading. Like those few chapters where he's in Moscow, some of the best reading I've ever read in my entire fucking life.
I know. Page 302 to 304, literally.
These
I'm going to read it.
barbs
Don't worry
and
about
fights with Trotskyism, and he just like writes it in real time. Like, yeah, no, this stupid bullshit. Okay. Anyway, next, it doesn't even concern him.
So in that case, then, so so again, this is his first organization within the U.S. the United States.
And I want to be clear that part of the reason this happened is because there was some white chauvinism in the CPUSA that was supposed to be being resolved in the Communist International.
Hey guys, we're going to get rid of that white chauvinism. Just give us like 10 minutes. We'll take care of it. I swear.
So Otto basically told him, well, don't join the party yet. Come over and join this brotherhood. And if the party can resolve it, we're all going to jump into the Communist Party.
But then it was interesting too, because he was trying to recruit one of his friends, like a guy that he had reading group. He was a member. He was in working for the post office, which was a pretty high rank for something you could do there. And they had a reading group going, but they didn't record it, so it obviously doesn't count. And then he was trying to recruit him.
Haywood podcast when?
Yeah, no, exactly. Thank you. But he went through his whole thing trying to recruit him, and the guy basically came out and said, I find being black trouble enough, but to be black and red at the same time, well, that's just double trouble. Yeah. And when you mix in the whites, why, that's triple trouble. And honestly, I hear you, but it was weird because he said
against him.
No.
At first, I was shocked by his offhand rebuff, considering an expression of opportunism. I felt that he had backslid even from his position at the post office, but it continued in a more serious tone. Apparently, he felt deep distrust for whites and their motives. Good call, dude. He regarded the YCL as just another organization of white do-gooders and saw me as their captive
YCL
Negro.
was the Young Communist League.
Yes, thank you. God, thank you.
And that's how Harry got into the party, is he was heading up the YCL pretty immediately, and he was like, but I'm 25. And they're like, but you'd be perfect for it.
Yeah. He said that he too was for socialism as a final solution, but that was a long way off, and he would not put it beyond the whites in the United States to distort socialism in a manner in which they could remain top dogs. In any case, he believes blacks would have to be on guard. In the meantime, he believed blacks should retain their own organizations under their own leadership, alliances. Yes, but we must decide the terms and conditions, he said. And again, this is getting back into that. Do we want to be assimilated and do we want to, or do we want our own autonomous and our right to self-determination under that whole national question thing that, our good friend Stalin's going to get to here in a minute. I heard he's great.
He's great.
So
pretty good.
So we get to the fourth convention of the CPUSA. The only thing I had in there is that the atmosphere was rife with charges and countercharges of right opportunism and left sectarianism. This factionalism spilled over into the league, which reflected alignments. That is the biggest Chekhov's gun, because it keeps coming back. This deviation left, right, who's on what line. But then so David, is there anything else in chapter 4 about the beginning stuff? Because we are about to get to Moscow, and I want to go to Moscow so bad.
Yeah, we definitely got to get to Moscow. But I want to say, me and Nathan did have a discussion, because it can get a little confusing when you talk about like left deviation, right deviation, left deviation, right deviation, because we know that like there's left comms and we know there's right wing opportunists. But when you keep saying it like that, it kind of makes it sound like you're some kind of like weird communist centrist instead of someone that's very practical and materialist.
Right.
So I think the way me and Nathan decided to put it is whenever they say left, we're talking utopian. They're not grounding anything in material conditions.
Right. Trotskyism.
Yeah. Trotskyism.
Well, whenever, to be fair, whenever he says left communism, or when he talks about the left, he puts it in quotes because they're not really left.
They're
Right?
just clowns.
But it becomes,
it's just Marxist center.
It becomes important because it's the faction that he gets labeled as throughout the left. He gets put in this left group, and it starts feeling.
Yeah.
It starts feeling weird. Again, all of this was Nathan not understanding. This is David's doing very nice and going like, we came to a thesis as a team, and it's not. It's David corrected Nathan for not understanding stuff like a dum-dum.
Nathan goes hard on the self-crit because he looks up to Haywood, so that's what that is.
Nathan goes hard on the Nathan goes hard on the self-crit because there's a lot to crit.
But we decided that we're just going to make, left synonymous with utopian when it's right, or synonymous with right and correct and being attacked when they're not actually this left deviation, and then right deviation is just opportunism.
It's opportunism.
So we figured if you keep those synonyms in your head is the best way to understand this. So when people hear us bring this up throughout the episode, or if they read the book themselves, as long as they understand that, they're going to have a better grip on things.
For sure. But then we go to Moscow, gang. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but holy shit, Moscow is the bomb. So 1925, we're heading to Moscow in 1925. So there is a lot. I mean, again, a lot going on right now.
Lenin's been dead for 2 years. The NEP is now in the middle of its like success, quote unquote. Yeah, I'm trying to. What else can I put into context? There's a lot of debate around this point where Trotsky still has some sway in the Supreme Soviet. They're debating. They haven't gotten there yet, and they won't for a few more years. But they're starting to debate collective farms.
Yeah. Meanwhile, over in the U.S., because that's where Harry's coming out of, we've got the economic boom that really lend a lot to American exceptionalism.
Which we're gonna get there. As we're on the way, again, there's a lot of this. There's a lot of pages of the lead up to and him leaving his first wife and no one, whatever.
Yeah.
But
she gets dusted off so easily
because she was bougie as fuck. His first wife, I mean, his every other wife he had, I will defend. Hazel was just a bougie, like wannabe Instagram influencer in 1925. Hazel gets cut.
Kardashian.
Hazel is cut. Hazel is canceled hard.
Yeah, Hazel is canceled. Yeah, she wanted him to stay out of the Communist Party and basically appeal to white people by dressing nice and whatever, and that was what she was obsessed with. And he was like, nope, bye.
Yeah, I would have left Hazel too.
But it's so interesting too because it's they go through the steps again. This is 1925. We haven't even hit World War II, let alone the Cold War. Yeah. But they were having to send him. They were having to go through Canada to get into Moscow, or to get into Europe with the intent of going to Moscow. I think
he called it an underground railroad.
He literally called it an underground railroad of shuffling Americans into Moscow. They sewed his political credentials into his jacket in case his visas and stuff got confiscated at customs. So there were a lot of things going on. But the reason he went to Moscow was not just on a pleasure cruise. It was because, and this sentence is going to make me cry every single time I say it, they had dedicated schools in Moscow to train revolutionaries from all over the world to be better communists. And they let them come there tuition free, paid them a stipend, took care of them, and brought them into Moscow with only the expectation that they would become better communists and better members of the party. And I'm going to need about 20 minutes to curl up in a ball and cry knowing that existed, and I will never get to see that. So we're going to so we're going KUTVA, Kutva, however you want to anachronize it. But that's the school we're going to. Kutva, yes. It is the University of the Toilers of the East, named for Stalin. Which is, guys, get a better name than that. That can't be your.
When you have name,
I'm gonna bring that
when you
back.
have name for Stalin in the name.
I don't know why you
put
just named for Stalin. Oh well, thank you. So he gets to Moscow again. First day, one of his first days in Moscow, I think. And he meets a guy who's going to come up a couple different times, but this was the initial most strike. I mean, this I think was the first time I was just like gobsmacked. And again, we're 155 pages of the 600-page book in, and we've been doing this for almost an hour, guys. If you thought you were getting out of here quickly, you were wrong, and I apologize. But he meets his friend Golden, and Golden and his wife had both come over. Jane was his wife. What was his first name? Or does he just call him Golden?
No, he has a first name. I don't remember.
He
what
has
it
a
is,
first name. It's Oscar. And it's just not Jane. But basically, his wife, Golden's wife, had passed away. They had been there for a matter of weeks at this point. So again, basically, perfect foreign exchange students show up in your country and study. This was the description of her funeral at the time. And this is one of the first things that Haywood saw when he got to Moscow. So a good portion of the American colony in Moscow was assembled at the cemetery. The chairman of the school collective, a young Georgian, delivered a stirring eulogy at the graveside. One of the students who was standing next to me made a running translation, sotto voce, which went something like this. The first among her race to come to the land of socialism, in search of freedom for her oppressed peoples, former slaves, to find out how the Soviets had done it. We were happy to receive her and her comrades. Condolences to her bereaved husband, our comrade Golden, and to the rest of the Negro students. The whole university has suffered a great loss. Rest in peace, Jane Golden. You were with us only a short time, but all of us have benefited from your presence and comradeship. Turning to Golden, he said, we Soviet people and comrades of oppressed colonial and dependent countries must carry on. We pledge our undying support to the cause of your people's freedom. Long live the freedom of our Negro brothers in America. Long live the Soviet Union and its Communist Party. Beacon of light for the struggle freedom of all oppressed peoples. Holy
I'm
shit.
about to cry for real.
Yeah, that really
I got
pulls at your
goosebumps,
heartstrings.
and I've already read this.
Right. Yeah.
God damn.
There's a lot
That's
of those
amazing.
moments, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so again, that's just
coming from the same man who served in World War, quote unquote, served in World War I, had to see a black man like hung from a lamppost in a French town by the American military, who sent a letter to France to talk about how black people aren't people. And then he comes to the Soviet Union and a comrade dies there, and they do a funeral procession led by those comrades, and then talk about how the Soviet Union stands with colonized people right off the bat.
Yeah.
Like that's his first introduction to the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like before he's there, his idea of being treated like a human being, which is a rarity for him, was Omaha before it got bad and France, where he's seeing people be lynched.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he's like, what? Wow. Like that floored him.
Right.
And then you get into, and then you kind of change gears and we jump into, so what was the school like? What was actual study at Kutva? What was that like? We students studied the classic works of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin. But unlike the past schooling we had known, this whole body of theory was related to practice. Theory was not regarded as dogma, but as a guide to action.
So you're telling me that praxis is actually theory in action?
It's
not just doing stuff.
It's in May 1925, Stalin delivered a historic speech at the school outlining Kutva's purpose and its main task. His lecture was the subject of continuous discussion and study. It was our introduction to Marxist theory on the national question and its development by Lenin and Stalin. So we jump down. The starting point for us was to understand that the formation of peoples into nations is an objective law of social development around which the Bolsheviks, particularly Lenin and Stalin, had developed a whole body of theory. According to this theory, a nation is a historically constituted, stable community of people based on four main characteristics. And this becomes debated throughout the whole book, so that's the only reason I'm doing this one verbatim. Common territory, common economic life, common language, and common psychological makeup or national character. Anyone that's read Stalin's what is found? It's not Foundations of Leninism that he does.
No,
The National
National
Question.
Question.
Yeah, it's
It's a
national
national
question.
question.
National
Yeah,
question.
let's say.
Very good.
Yeah, it's very good. But this is a short kind of brief. And this is how they were studying that. This was how they applied it in school. Since the development of imperialism, the liberation of the oppressed nations has become a question whose final resolution would only come through proletarian revolution. Fuck yes. The guiding principle of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union on the national question was to bring about the unity of the laboring masses of the various nationalities for the purpose of waging a joint struggle. First to overthrow Tsarism and imperialism, then to build the new society under a working class dictatorship. The accomplishment of the latter required the establishment of equality before the law for all nationalities, with no special privileges for any one people, and the right of the colonies and subject peoples to separate. So again, this gets into, and we're going to get there as we go throughout Moscow, but getting into, again, the national question and the constant thing that Haywood is reckoning with is how does this apply in America?
That's why
America's
he's there.
stupid.
They sent him there to study the national question.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so it's exactly like, hey, I've got to wrap my head around this. I've got to devote part of my life to this. What does this mean?
Yep. And for anybody that thinks that like life under Stalin was some nightmare for national minorities, it gets debunked over and over and over and over in this book.
Over. Oh my God! Again, and we're gonna trust me. It's highlighted. We're gonna get there. We don't. Nothing. Nothing.
We don't
gets
need to jump ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. No, because it's gonna happen.
Patience.
Direct and determined. So the precondition for forming such unity is a proletariat of the oppressor nations gives direct and determined support to the liberation movement of the oppressed peoples against imperialism of its own country. For no nation can be free if it oppresses other nations. Engels. This support implies the advocacy, defense, and implementation of the slogan of the right of nations to secession, to independent existence as states. And this became this is founding kind of how, so in America, what would that look like kind of a thing. But again, it just goes to show this was what they were learning in school. This is what they're teaching. So yeah, they very clearly were not just trying to plow over every other nationality. Like there's a reason you don't just call the Soviet Union Russia. It wasn't fucking Russia. There were a whole bunch of other countries in there, guys. And
I hate when people do that. I hate it.
They were wildly respected. Understand? They all their own nations. They were told to flourish. So it just keeps going over and over. David, do you have anything before I launch into more highlights? Because God, I have
No, we got to get through these highlights.
Yes. At the time of the revolution, there were many nationalities within the borders of the Soviet Union in which the characteristics of nationhood had not yet fully matured, and in fact had been suppressed by the czars. It was the Soviet system itself which became a powerful factor in the consolidation of these nationalities into nations, as socialist industry and collective farming created the economic basis for this consolidation. So Haywood's even arguing, and not even arguing, he's just stating his fact. The Soviet Union is the reason some of these nations were allowed to became into existence. They didn't functionally have a nation until, we got the industrialization in there that allowed them to form the economic basis of their nationhood.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, and you could think of some of the nations where that's, definitely true, right? I mean, you can think of like the Tuvan Socialist
Throat
Republic.
Singers?
What?
You say Tuvan, I just hear throat singers.
Okay.
I just think of that. I can't make the noise, obviously, because I haven't studied Tuvan throat singing, but it's there.
All right. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of a big thing, and he'll even get into like Ukraine, and a lot of times today people like play off Ukraine as this horribly occupied state by the Soviet Union, and then he talks about how Lenin went in and was like, okay, so we got to let the kulaks exist in Ukraine a little bit more because their self-determination is important, and we'll swing back to this later.
Yeah, and boy, did Stalin swing back later.
Swung hard, swung decisively, as Joe was wont. Another chunk here that just makes me wistful. Students had the right of citizens, voting and participating in local elections. The school discussed and dealt with all issues which Soviet workers and peasants discussed at their workplaces. As with all students who pursued courses in higher education in the Soviet Union, we at Kutva received full room and board, clothes, and a small stipend for spending money. There was, of course, no tuition. We used to attend workers' cultural clubs and do volunteer work, like working Saturdays to help build the Moscow subways. Education for us was not an ivory tower.
If you've never seen them, look at it.
Oh, yeah.
Just, the students and recent ex-students in the room are weeping right now.
Right.
Yeah. They're all aching.
So many tears.
Education for us was not an ivory tower, but a true integration into the Soviet society where we received firsthand knowledges from our experiences. And that, again, I've been out of school for far longer than I want to even reckon with at this point. But just imagining that your education is a practical thing, that it is hand in hand, and that it's just so opposite of that kind of ivory tower, stereotype that you think of every other Western fucking.
Yeah. Can you earn your education and still only if your parents can pay for it, and still only if preparing for a job, and it's none of that. Yeah.
A class that stands out in my memory was one on how to make a revolution. Guys, they had a class on how to make a revolution.
What?
How the fuck are we failing this hard? They had a class. We got it. I need to take
the time
that
machine,
because that class doesn't exist anymore.
Are you sure it's not on PragerU somewhere? I think I saw it on PragerU somewhere. It might be. Yep. A class that stands out in my memory was on how to make a revolution, to seize power once the situation was ripe. This course consisted of a series of lectures by a young Red Army officer. He had been a heroic figure in the Moscow uprising of 1917 and the subsequent seizure of power by the Bolsheviks in that city. And again, that just to me, just such
Sounds
practical
amazing.
Education from the people that understood it, not fucking just professors spouting shit off.
get out, Noam Chomsky.
Fucking Noam.
Let him know.
Fucking Noam. Oh, and then we get to, so then there's one. So I have one last thing before we get to Trotsky. So I'm going to read this and then it's Trotsky. So just anything you want to
Everyone
cover on
get
this
in your
chapter
beer.
after this. Yeah. Oh, there's a whole chapter on
we
Trotsky
go.
dunks, guys. It gets so good. But this is again, we talk about the racism and how different this was. In the Soviet Union, remnants of national and racial prejudice from the old society were attacked by education and law. It was a crime to give or receive direct or indirect privileges or to exercise discrimination because of race or nationality. It'd be wild if we had like that in our country where that's supposed to be a law.
2019, it still doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. During my entire stay in the Soviet Union, I encountered only one instance of racial hostility. It was on a Moscow streetcar. Basically, drunk guy comes into streetcar, mumbles something about black devils in our country. And literally the entire streetcar shuts down, grabs him, goes, "How dare you scum insult people who are guests of our country." They then had an impromptu on the spot meeting where they debated what to do with the man. So that mock trial with Judge Reinhold, just here we go, guys, let's do this. We're having this. They decide that, no, we're taking her to the cop. Haywood doesn't even want to do anything, but he's like, no, you don't understand. We have to do this. This is how you learn. This is how we do things here. They took him down to the police station. They had to make their statement. And Haywood's like, I don't want anything to happen to him. They're like, no, we're very sorry. They apologized profusely. They felt so bad. And they said, no, we're going to keep him overnight. And maybe that will teach him his lesson. And imagine if the drunk tank was used for being a shithead instead of just being drunk. Imagine if just being a racist asshole was enough to get you thrown in jail overnight, as opposed to a blue check mark on Twitter or something. I don't know.
Well, the guy who did it, after he sobered up, he apologized to Haywood. He was like, "I'm so sorry. I was just wasted and off my ass. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. You're a great comrade."
Yeah, it keeps going up, and then the last part, that whole last part of that chapter is all on Big Bill Haywood.
Yes,
but
we're not going to get into him here, but he's a figure people should know a lot about. He's founding member of the Wobblies and a founding member of CPUSA.
Yes,
yeah.
Big Bill,
He's no Harry Haywood, but he's still pretty cool.
Exactly. But this is not the forum to go into Big Bill Haywood. It is the forum to go into chapter 6, which is aptly titled Trotsky's Day in Court. It's here. It's here. I never thought I'd see the day. But by the time, all right, so we jump down. They're worried about a Thermidorian reaction, which Thermidorian. Thermidor was the name of July in
I don't know
French,
enough about the French Revolution.
French Revolutionary calendar, I believe.
Okay.
Come at me, bro. Unless I'm wrong, in which case edit this all out and make it sound like I wasn't just a dick. I mean, I don't know how to do that. But by the time Black American students arrived, the temporary attraction to Trotsky had been reversed. So he says early on, initially people were like, ooh, who's this Trotsky guy? Oh, wait, why is he wearing those stupid glasses? Oh, what's with the stupid haircut? Ooh, I don't like this guy.
Stupid leather uniform.
But by the time time, the Black American students arrived, the temporary attraction had been reversed. The issues involved in the struggle with Trotsky were discussed in the school. They involved the destiny of socialism in the Soviet Union. Which way were the Soviet people to go? What was to be the direction of their economic development? Was it possible to build a socialist economic system? These questions were not only theoretical ones, but were issues of life and death. The economic life of the country would not stand still and wait while they were being debated. That sentence right there is such a fucking key to why, again, fucking you cannot just be neutral on a moving train. You can't just be standing here and go, well, let's figure it out. They were making huge decisions in real time, and anyone that wants to armchair quarterback them can get fucked and send them to me and I'll fucking have that conversation. But no, it was very much on the ground practically. People were not in the interest of just idle theory. They wanted to know how the fuck is this going to apply to us now?
Yeah. And that's something where, like, when you look back, self-critique, it's very, very good to think, how do we do this better next time? What mistakes were made? How do we not make those same mistakes? When you go back to critique or self-critique and you're like, well, these guys are just big fuck ups, you're already off to a horrible foot. Yeah.
Well, so before we move on, and I'm sure you'll hit it again later, but the lie, which I now know is a lie from reading this book, the dominant narrative is that in the Soviet Union, Stalin was a dictator and he used his power to silence Trotsky and therefore expel him from the Soviet Union. However, up until the point, literally until the point that Trotsky is expelled from the party, they are teaching Trotsky in the school. So if Stalin is trying to silence Trotsky and get him out, then why are they teaching Trotsky in the school that existed under Stalin? Because he was literally taught, like, class to class, debate. They debated his theory, as you just kind of addressed. But they don't just do that in 1926. They do that all the way up until the point at which he's expelled from the party. But according to democratic centralism, once somebody's expelled, it's been debated, it's been decided, that's the end of it. And that's what nobody ever fucking talks about, because it had nothing to do with Trotsky, like trying to get rid of Trotsky. It had to do with the fact that it was voted on. It was decided that they were not going to pursue Trotsky's line. And he still tried to have underground meetings to overthrow to the Supreme Soviet and like get it to, go on.
Over and over again. And that's the other, and you're 100% right though. Cause that was extremely striking reading this, is how many chances people were given. You think to modern day examples, Venezuela, the way Juan Guaido was treated by Maduro, of this narrative of you have these bloodthirsty monstrous dictators. Dude, you staged a coup against him. The guy is still walking around, as far as last check, he's still chilling. Like life's good. They give so many chances, and we're gonna get to it, so I don't get too far ahead of myself because I'll end up repeating myself ad nauseum. But you're 100% right. This concept of it was all on Stalin had had one hand on a lever and he just pushed that lever and people disappeared and things happened the way he wanted to, is a fucking bullshit narrative. And this book is the best and most just practical way I've ever seen to show that, because it's just so offhanded the way he talks. He's talking about this in the 70s. This isn't like a 2019 Twitter people trying to make shit up. This is literally just a guy who was there saying, no, we talked about Trotsky, but we kind of thought he was a bit of an idiot and we just didn't really pay attention to him. As it was pointed out in our classes, Trotsky portrayed the peasantry as an undifferentiated mass. He made no distinction between the masses of peasants who worked on their own land, the mujiks, I think. Yeah, I was about to say, Justin, come in and save me here. And the exploiting strata who hired labor, the kulaks. You may have heard of them. His conclusions openly contradicted the strategy of the Bolsheviks, developed by Lenin, of building the worker-peasant alliance as the basis for the dictatorship of the proletariat. Further, they were at complete variance with any realistic economic or social analysis. I just love how flippantly he goes, and they were also just complete bullshit. Right. He populated his own theory of quote unquote permanent revolution. He threw around a good deal of left sounding rhetoric, but his theories were thoroughly defeatist and class collaborationist. Just over and over.
This sounds like all of the Twitter groups that like claim anti-imperialism and just to like do the imperialist narratives for Rojava and all that stuff. It's like, oh, it sounds real left until you actually look at the real world.
Yeah. Given the state of the revolutionary forces at the time, the position was dangerously defeatist. So again, he's talking about Trotsky's entire theory here. For instance, 1923 marked a period of recession for the revolutionary wave in Europe. I think, yeah, everyone's kind of aware of that. It was a year of defeat for communist movements in Germany, Italy, Poland, and Bulgaria. What then, Stalin asked, is left for our revolution? So let vegetate in its own contradictions and rot away while waiting for the world revolution? To that question, Trotsky had no answer. Like the only time he didn't have something he wanted to say. Stalin's reply was to build socialism in the Soviet Union. The Soviet working class, aligned with the peasantry, had vanquished its own bourgeoisie politically and was fully capable of doing the job economically and building up a socialist society. Stalin's position did not mean the isolation of the Soviet Union. The danger of capitalist restoration still existed and would exist until the advent of classless society. The Soviet people understood that they could not destroy this external danger by their own efforts, that it could only be finally destroyed as a result of a victorious revolution in at least several of the countries of the West. The triumph of the triumph of socialism in the Soviet Union could not be final as long as the external danger existed. Therefore, the success of the revolutionary forces in the capitalist West was a vital concern of the Soviet people. When you talk about narratives that just get completely fucking debunked, this thing I keep hearing all the time of like, no, they didn't care about anyone else. They just wanted to consolidate power in their own country and have their own little cabal. They didn't care about the people. Everyone in the streets knew that this was not going to last if you did not push the revolution further. This whole thing of like Trotsky, like, oh, well, they didn't want internationalism. Trotsky wanted a revolution. They all just wanted to sit back. No, they recognized they needed to do that, but they also knew what the fuck a thing called timing was and that it might be important occasionally when you're trying to do a revolution.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people out there that are just like, oh, socialism in one country? You can't have that. Gotcha, tanky.
Yeah.
I can't believe
they probably learned these good theories in their class on how to start a revolution that they had. How about we get one of those and then you come to me with your bullshit, your nonsense. We students felt that Trotsky's position denigrated the achievement of the Soviet Revolution. That, I think, is a huge one right there. That is really... You want to talk about what did the people on the ground actually think? They thought that Trotsky was shitting over what they had just accomplished.
And
why would you line up behind that person?
How they literally did that when they go through the anniversary celebration.
Yep. The struggle raged on over a period of 5 years, 22 to 27, during which time the Trotsky bloc had access to the press, and Trotsky's works were widely circulated for everyone to read.
So what
Trotsky
you're trying to say is that Stalin wasn't silencing Trotsky?
He was not defeated by bureaucratic decisions or Stalin's control of the party apparatus, as his partisans and Trotskyite historians claim. He had his day in court and finally lost because his whole position flew in the face of Soviet and world realities. He was doomed to defeat because his views were incorrect and failed to conform to objective conditions, as well as the needs and interests of the Soviet people. I don't know how else, again, I don't know how else to say it. That is from a person that was there.
Yep.
I don't know how else to say it. And then this sentence here, the one that David has hinted at. So you talk about Trotsky's day in court, and the day in court was the plenum of the executive committee of the Communist International. They were meeting in late 26. He didn't get it. Haywood didn't get in, but his brother Otto did. Otto had made it over. And he described the session and the stellar performance of Trotsky. Stalin made the report for the Russian delegation. Trotsky then asked for 2 hours to defend his position. He was given 1. He spoke in Russian and then personally translated and delivered his speech in German and then in French and held the floor for about 3 hours, which sounds like a Mayor Pete thing to do. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
that sounds like some Mayor Pete bullshit where it's just like, look at me, I can do it in a different language now.
They give you 1 hour and you take 3.
Right.
Yeah. Otto said it was the greatest display of oratory he had ever heard. Despite this, Trotsky and his allies, Zinoviev and Kamenev, suffered a resounding defeat, obtaining only 2 votes from the whole body.
That's definitive, right?
It's just like, it's such an encapsulation of Trotsky in a fucking nutshell. It's, oh, it was the greatest speech I've ever heard. Did you vote for it?
No.
Fuck no. Did you listen to him? Come on. Like, just because he talked good don't mean he was saying anything.
Trotsky talked good.
Yes. And again, under the Soviet Union, they employ democratic centralism.
Right.
And once something is decided by the party, the debate is done.
Exactly. They have heard the piece and then they pass it.
Yeah.
And that's the important part, because that sounds like, when you first hear that, you go, oh, well, that sounds pretty authoritarian. We're getting in, as we go through this, when they decide something, it's the amount of debate that goes into deciding a party line in the Soviet Union and the Communist International is more debate than anyone in 2019 can imagine. It is literally like...
It was 5 years of debate, basically.
Yeah. It's not like Brexit.
I mean, it is heavy. I mean, it's back and forth and back and forth. And when you decide the line, it's not because the other guy didn't get to have his say and didn't get his brilliant idea out there. It's because everyone else thought you were an idiot.
Right.
It's just not that hard.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's actually a period in the middle of this book where I was thinking, these things these guys are saying, these two sides are getting a little redundant, because that's how long they debated it, where he's writing this out, and in his overarching summary, where he's just summarizing the debate, it's redundant. It gets voiced so much.
But that's what you see, is it's like the things they were arguing. I mean, they're getting down to the things they're debating are like one paragraph differences in theory to a certain level. By the end of it. Then they talk about, the 10th anniversary, Trotsky's followers attempted to stage. So again, they're at the 10th anniversary of the revolution. Trotsky's followers attempted to stage a counter demonstration in opposition to the traditional celebration. I remember vividly.
It was basically like reminiscent of like have you seen like the pictures of the White History Month celebration or whatever? That's basically
That's exactly very cool.
They as they passed the hotel, leaflets were showered down on us, and orators appeared at windows shouting slogans of "Down with Stalin."
So they started off with newspapers. Classic Trot.
They were answered with catcalls. They were answered with catcalls and booing from the crowds in the streets below. We seized the leaflets and tore them up. This attempt to rally the people against the party was a total failure and struck no responsive chord among the masses. It was equivalent to rebellion, and this demonstration was the last overt act of the Trotskyist opposition. Later, many Trotsky followers criticized themselves and were accepted back into the party. Wait a minute, we didn't just murder all of them? I thought we murdered all of them. We should have murdered all of them, to be fair, but that's not the point.
Hindsight's 2020,
but we
I
did
guess.
it. But we didn't, because cooler heads than me prevailed. But among them was a hard core of bitter enders who criticized themselves publicly only in order to continue the struggle against Stalin's leadership from within. Their bitterness fed on itself, and they emerged later in the 30s as part of the conspiracy, which wound up on the side of, can you guess?
The fucking Nazis.
Nazi Germany.
Yikes.
Throughout the whole struggle, we black students at the school have been ardent supporters of the position of Stalin and the Central Committee. Most certainly were Stalinists, whose policy we saw as a continuation of Lenin's. Kind of important. Those today who use the term Stalinist, quote unquote, as an epithet evade the real question. That is, were Stalin and the Central Committee correct? I believe history has proven they were correct. And this is the moment.
There's so many air horns.
You just tape this air horn button.
It never really gets old. It's good times. And then I actually, in this whole chapter of Trotsky's Game Court, I scrimmed down to basically the end of the chapter. David, do you have anything before like the last paragraph of this chapter? Because he goes on holiday in Crimea, and we've kind of already hit on this. Where
it's beautiful, and he talks about the Crimeans from the Tatars to, I don't know how to pronounce that.
They have each ethnic minority has their own theater, which their language is spoken in. Everybody learns of the languages that are in that area. Obviously, they learn Russian so they can communicate with everybody within the Soviet Union, but they also learn all of the other languages that are native to the populations there. For societies that are have a forgotten language, they develop the language of that minority into a coherent language and then teach that language. Incredible the amount of stuff they do.
Just read that, because I even before and so many times now I'll stumble upon anti-Soviet propaganda where they're like, oh, they fucking made them learn Russian and killed their languages and shit. No, they did so much to sustain their culture.
Wait.
There were dozens of languages that did not have an alphabet, and they developed an alphabet.
To help them record their history.
It's crazy.
Share their stories.
It's important to know that too. I mean, this is the kind of thing that's important to know because, right now, you look at this Xinjiang stuff, and they're like, "Oh my God, they're raising the Muslims because they're teaching them Mandarin and stuff." And it's like They have an autonomous feature where they speak their language.
If they can't participate in the political system, then what the fuck is the point? Everybody has to learn a common language.
Right. They're giving.
And you're learning this. And you see it you see how critical it is. How critical political participation is. Because again, in America, we can't. What do you mean? What political participation? What you mean that thing that 68% of us don't do? Why would that be important? But you can see in the Soviet Union and any socialist country how fucking important being able to participate in the system and have your voice heard is.
Yeah.
And so it just never goes. This is where and again, you just want to get into it because it keeps coming up. But again, the concept of racism and how foreign this was. So the people, he's in a village in the Caucasus. Caucasus. I got nothing. I don't know the plural of Caucasus. But they were. It was of a African. They were of African descent. So they were both black. And so they were like, hell. Oh, okay, all right, cool. This was like the first time they had seen anyone out, like an American black person. So the people in the village wanted to know what was happening to our brothers over the mountains, because this is over the Ural Mountains and all of that. Otto related to them the troubles we had gone through, described the travels over the mountains and across the big sea. As the evening wore on and the local brandy was consumed, toast after toast was drunk to our little brother from over the hills. Aww. Otto described to them, I know, it's so wholesome. Otto described to them the conditions of blacks in the U.S., the lynchings, racism, and brutality. Incensed, a few jumped up and pulled out their daggers. I don't know who they thought they were going to stab at this point. I believe that they legitimately thought they were going across the sea, and they're like, all right, we're going to go fuck some white people up.
That's big energy, though. That's my big energy.
It is big energy. They said, they literally jumped up, pulled out their daggers. You should make a revolution. Why don't you revolt? Why do you put up with it? We were not the only ones surprised to learn about this group. It was new to the Russians of Moscow, too. Mm-hmm. Several of the tribesmen later visited Moscow as a result. So again, they kind of found this tribe that was living within Russia, but kind of off on its own because Russia's huge. But again, just that mentality of why would you put up with this? How much of their basic humanity had been that was unacceptable to just anyone you would present these conditions to would consider them unacceptable, and yet we still don't really fucking reckon with them today.
Right. Yeah.
And that gets us to chapter 7 and the best title of anything ever in the history of time. And that does, in fact, beat Trotsky's Day in Court because, guys, we're going to the Lenin School.
Nice. I want that. I want that so bad.
I want this anime. I want Lenin School anime.
Yes.
This is my
dream.
It is everyone's dream. So the Lenin School in short was basically like graduate school for communists. Like this is the high end. All right, everyone gets into Kutva.
You get your doctorates in revolution, and then you go do some revolution.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Your entire like graduation ceremony is you just walk down to the International, and then you get handed a Molotov cocktail, and then you have to go fucking like start some shit. From the ashes of the defeated Trotskyist left rose an equally dangerous, organized, secret, rightist opposition headed by none other than Lovestone. Oh, all right. So I guess it's important. Guys, the U.S. sucks.
I'm not noticed. Yeah.
Spoiler alert. The U.S. is bad. The head of the Communist Party at the time is a gentleman named Lovestone. I don't give a shit what his first name is because his last name is Lovestone. And if you can't remember that, I can't help you. But he is a shithead.
Yes.
And his patron, the guy who is like super, super behind him, is a guy by the name of Nikolai Bukharin. And,
no.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not super good.
Yeah. And to get into the, I mean, just a brief overview for the listeners, there was two big factions in the CPUSA at the time. And
I thought you were about to do a brief overview of like Soviet history at the time. I'm like, God, you're listening to Proles Roundtable. Yeah. We don't need that.
Yeah, no, there's two big factions, and Lovestone headed one of them up. But people talked about constantly two big factions. Like you couldn't tell. Like Haywood goes in over and over. Like we didn't really know the difference. We kind of picked a side that seemed right, but they were pretty well the same.
Yeah, and it was very much. But you started to see the kind of fun, craven.
Yeah,
America. There is a version of American exceptionalism, but it's not the good kind. It's we just create the worst fucking political everything. Anything we touch turns to political garbage.
Yeah, and some foreshadowing for the rest of America. Lovestone, this was big against, they had the drive to push out the white chauvinism that got Harry and Otto going into the CP USA, and then, of course, off to the Kutva and Lenin School and everything like that. And during that time, Lovestone kind of gained, as his faction gained power away from another faction that still existed, because he brought in, like, we're going away from white chauvinism, we're going to appoint this black person to this position and this black person to this position. But Harry talks about, like, it wasn't very many, and he'll get into where it felt very tokenized. He was kind of getting his boys in that just happened to be black, so people go, oh, look, they're going away with the white chauvinism. But it was really a power consolidation.
Right.
Yes. So he talks about Bukharin, and he says on the home front, Bukharin had his base among the capitalists, the landlords, and the kulaks. In parentheses, upper peasantry. It's like, no, that's just stop. It's not a thing. They're kulaks.
You're not a peasant if you have property.
You're not a peasant. You're not an upper peasant. You're a kulak. Get the fuck out. And pushed a line that would have a lopsidedly developed industry along consumer lines, to the detriment of the vast masses of the Soviet people.
But they're looking out for the consumers, Nathan.
Oh, fuck off. Internationally, Bukharin greatly underestimated the war danger and the potential revolutionary situation that developed on a world scale. At the same time, he greatly overestimated the strength and resiliency of imperialism. The Lenin School students helped to legitimize the anti-Lovestone struggle in the U.S. party by linking it with the fight against right deviation. And that's going to come back time and time and time again. And then we get to skip a whole bunch of pages. In September 1917, the good old days, Lenin declared Bolshevik support for the land program of the SRs, while pointing out that only a proletarian revolution could put even this program into practice. The SR program called for equal distribution of land among the peasants, while the Bolsheviks favored collective and eventually state-owned farms. But since the SR program represented the understanding of the majority of the peasants, Lenin's policy was to resolve this difference by teaching the masses, and in turn, in italics, learning from the masses, the practical, expedient measures for bringing about such a transition. Again, just another wildly offhand, hey, they weren't just dictating from on high. And again, this is the biggest thing that the U.S. gets wrong every single time in this, is this inability to talk to your actual base, to understand who you're actually speaking for and who you're supporting, and just deciding, I want to do this thing and I'm going to do it. It's weird how that critique never appears for Stalin in this entire book. Never seems to be an issue for Stalin to actually listen to what the people want. There was a November 8th decree. As a democratic government, we cannot ignore the decision of the masses of the people. This is Lenin, even though we may disagree with it. In fact, in the fire of experience, applying the decree in practice and carrying it out locally, the peasants will themselves realize where the truth lies. We must be guided by experience. We must allow complete freedom to the creative faculties of the masses. Support the people, and the people will figure it out. They're going to get there. Just trust your people. So then we go, there's some back and forth. We go down. That gave me the chance to get off of my international propaganda spiel, and I jumped right in. Oh no, I replied. This is again Haywood. I replied, there are 12 million blacks in the U.S., about 1/10 of the population. I went on to tell them about the blacks in the South and the modern day remnants of the plantation system, sharecropping, Jim Crow, and lynch terror. Someone remarked, "Oh, like it was under the old regime." Many of the villagers nodded their heads in agreement. So this statement comes from, he went to a small village, I believe in Ukraine. So this is in Ukraine. He's talking about the experience of black people in America, and the Ukrainian, the I don't want to say peasants, but the townspeople in this Ukrainian town were like, "Oh, you mean like what they used to do to the Jews before the Soviets took over?"
Oh shit.
So, all those pogroms and shit like that was absolutely a thing. No big deal.
Yeah.
But since Stalin was an anti-Semite, wouldn't they be well aware of this? I
know. It's so weird. It's so strange. They never once brought up that whole thing. So that is all I have for the Lenin School. David, do you have anything else fun in the Lenin School before we head chapter 8?
Not particularly on that chapter.
Thank God. Okay, self-determination. the fight for a correct line. Chapter 8. This is where we really start digging into what is the correct line for the national question for blacks in America. To me, the idea of a black nation within U.S. boundaries seemed far-fetched and not consonant with American reality. So again, Haywood really trying to ground this in practical reality, not trying to be an idealist.
Yeah, and he goes into like how he really has that Garveyism kind of stuck in the back of his head.
Yep. I saw the solution through the incorporation of blacks into U.S. society on the basis of complete equality, and only socialism could bring this to pass. There was no doubt in my mind that the path to freedom for us blacks led directly to socialism, uncluttered by any interim stage of self-determination or black political power.
Nice.
The unity of black and white working against the common enemy, U.S. capitalism, was the motor leading toward the dual goal of black freedom and socialism. So that right there is one formulation of the national question in America. It turns out that Haywood is going to disagree with that position pretty soon. But that was one, but again, not a bad position. I don't think anyone...
No, it seems reasonable enough.
Yes.
It's just there's a better position that emerges.
Exactly. And that's
much
what
more practical. And
that's what we get into a lot of this, is a lot of these debates are not between like, hey, should we lynch black people or should they have their own country?
Right.
It's different levels of what is the practical means of achieving equality for black people within America and for achieving socialism. Is it, do we do it all at one time, or is it, do we grant autonomy to blacks and then we do it? What is the right answer here? Yeah. And this is not something that they just rushed to. They struggled with this. Like the Jews, I reasoned the position of U.S. blacks was that of an oppressed race, though at the time, I am sure I would have been hard-pressed to define precisely what was meant by that phrase. I just love how humble he is about his own shortcomings at times. The main factor in the oppression of Jews under the Tsar had been the religious factor. The main factor with U.S. blacks was race. Blacks lacked some of the essential attributes of a nation, which had been defined by Stalin in his classic work, Marxism and the National Question. So another instance of classic Nathan, keep reading the damn book and you'll get the answer to the question you asked 20 minutes ago. Might as well be an ongoing theme here. In the work, so then we get to New Data, the very grippingly titled book, New Data on the Laws Governing Development of Capitalism and Agriculture, which spoke about the United States. I mean, yeah, it's a good one. In this work, published in 1915, this is how you can. This was before Lenin had his good publisher. It must have been, because that's not a good Lenin title right there. Lenin viewed the question of blacks in the South as one of an uncompleted agrarian and bourgeois democratic revolution. He drew attention to the remarkable similarity and between the economic positions of South's black tenants and the emancipated serfs in the agrarian centers of Russia, pointing out that both groups were not tenants in the European civilized sense, but semi-slaves and sharecroppers. So again, trying to tie this. All right, what's the through line to, in a Marxist sense, how are we going to tie this to what happened here? Well, they're most similar to the Jewish peasants. This is kind of how that would play out. Again, we're going to realize that the United States is kind of a big giant ball of shit, so we can't really have anything nice, but that's their reasoning at least. So we get into the Comintern is having, so they're getting into, they put forward this concept of, well, should we do self-determination? And the Comintern's a little about that. The reluctance in this regard, I presume, was because they did not want to push their position against the unanimous opposition of the American Party, including its black members. So the concept of giving African Americans self-determination was opposed uniformly. Yeah, so instead of shoving it down everyone's
Harry Haywood
throat,
was the minority at this point by a long shot.
Very much.
Yeah. And even that came in later. Like, they talked about how they had sent someone from the Comintern into the Communist Party to voice for it, and it was pretty soundly rejected.
Yeah. They slapped that down pretty quick.
Yeah. And then again,
they were like class reductionists to the nth degree.
Yeah.
After all, the Comintern was a voluntary union of communist parties which operated under democratic centralism. It was not the policy of the Comintern leadership to arbitrarily force positions on member parties. Just simple statements that refute everything you've been told about how shit works are just so powerful to me. I don't know why.
And he's not saying it as a refutation. He's just
saying it because it was the fact.
Yeah, it's just setting up the setting for you to understand what he's going through.
And then this is where, and I'll let David take this a little bit, because I think because my problem is I got into highlighting like entire giant pages at this point for this, because it was just this until I realize it now in hindsight that it's not as important, but at the time it was his. So, David, his synthesis of the national question, because I basically highlighted the entire page and I don't want to try and distill that right now.
In his synthesis of the national question, he sees the Black Belt, which is, of course, this, region, and I don't think he goes through it, but it stretches, Georgia to Mississippi, I think.
I believe.
Yeah. Which at this point had like 47% of the black population. I think it's still like something like 40%, or it's a dense population. It never really advanced economically. And part of it advancing economically was the land was supposed to be given back to black black people, and they were supposed to be defended. There's this period called Reconstruction that I think most people know about, and most people kind of learned a little
familiar
recently.
with everybody takes 7th grade history. Everyone familiar with Reconstruction a little bit?
Yeah, and so what Haywood gets into is when Reconstruction ended, was it Hayes that was what was the contested presidency? Where it doesn't matter anyway.
I must say it matters so little.
Yeah. So anyway, there's basically the presidency that comes to an end because they say, okay, well it's too close to call, but you can be the president if you drop Reconstruction. Once that happens,
Tilden Hayes. Yeah, Tilden was the other one. Hayes is the one that got the presidency.
Yep. So anyway,
damn it, I shouldn't know that.
Anyway, when that happens, that leaves things in this shocked state where black people not only are subject to the KKK and these lynch mobs and Jim Crow laws, but they're not very developed. They don't have the land, that the wealth hasn't been redistributed back to them, and so they have to rely on sharecropping. Right. And so with sharecropping, they're stuck remaining poor. They're stuck remaining second-class citizens, and they're stuck in their own survival methods and their own economic systems and their own cultures, essentially living within the United States, but totally isolated. So they niche all these checks on the national question, and they are absolutely an oppressed group. And so the idea of the national question is, they fit the definition of a nation. They should have the self-determination of this nation and be able to decide, how the economic policy applies to them so they can develop their economics and develop into socialism. And that way you can do the dual battle of liberation of black Americans and socialism. And you're not going to have one really effectively without the other.
Mm-hmm. And that gets us to Chapter 9. The 6th Congress of the Comintern, a blow against the right. All right, we had too many good chapters in a row. We had one weird chapter
fairly
title.
Boring. Yeah. It's mostly factional. I mean, it's interesting because it talks about it's really a decisive struggle in the Communist Party, but it's not engaging in as far as it matters to most folks.
If I wanted to give his wife the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to say she cut this chapter.
My guess is that she cut all of the Soviet Union shit. Is my guess.
I hope not. You better not have. She was not a. I don't think Harry Haywood married a trot. I'm not going to say that because that's so important.
But if she's trying to sell books, what's she going to cut?
Oh God! Don't remind me that Haymarket exists as an organization.
We're trying to forget too.
But no, it's I agree, and I Chapter 9 I have highlights, but it's inter-party factionalism. It's not important to understand the Everstone because then, and it should be denoted by the fact that Chapter 10 has the better title, Lovestone Unmasked.
The only thing I'll say, Chapter 9, or maybe it was the end of Chapter 8 that we skipped over that I'm kind of lament is South Africa had the white South Africans.
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay, good.
Okay. Sit down, boy. You don't think I'm going to skip the white South Africans whining about white genocide, do you? No. No. Wouldn't miss that for the world. No, that's the good shit. So we head in Lovestone Unmasked. Again, we're talking about factionalism in the USSR. We're talking about, or not in the USSR. No, there was no factionalism in the USSR. It was perfect. No, the factionalism in the CPUSA. So the Lovestone. It turned out he wasn't actually giving his people all the information. Like, he was maintaining these wild majorities while not actually giving everyone all the information that was coming back from the Comintern or saying what their actual line was. So all of a sudden you see some stuff starting to pop off. And you get down into, in the Soviet Union, the right line of Bukharin and his friends had encouraged resistance on the part of the kulaks and capitalist elements to the 5-year plan, industrialization and collectivization. They resisted the state monopoly on foreign trade. This was reflected in mass sabotage, terrorism against collective farmers, party workers and government officials in the countryside burning down collective farms and state granaries. In the same year, in 1928, a widespread conspiracy of wreckers was exposed in the Shakti district of the Dantes coal basin. The conspirators had close connections with former mine owners and foreign capitalists. Their aim was to disrupt socialist development. As a result, the counteroffensive could no longer be postponed, and CPUSA was obliged to take a sharp turn against the menacing right and its leaders. I read that whole thing to go, I just love it when shit that you guys brought up during the Stalin episode comes back in other works. It's just so good. But again, another on the ground, just a guy like, yeah, no, they were absolutely self-sabotaging. Like, they were absolutely, the kulaks and the right were trying to fuck this up. They were trying to create bad conditions, famine conditions, all of that kind of shit.
Yeah, and he even kind of said, the Communist Party only even comes after them because they have to.
Yeah.
They won't stop, you know?
They didn't murder them. They're just like, at a certain point, it's like, you can't keep burning our infrastructure down, please. I would prefer you not do that. That would be great.
Yeah, at one point they had to go Mao on landlords, so.
Full sport.
Every once in a while.
It's not.
And then you get the subtitle, Curtains for Lovestone, which is just such a great, I mean, come on.
It's curtains for Lovestone.
Yeah, see? So, again, we realize that this is all coming. They were trying to liquidate factional. So this is where we're getting into, they're getting to a head. The Comintern is realizing that there is some bad factionalism going on in the U.S. But with regards to the minority, it criticized Biddleman's apex theory and stated that sharpening of the general crisis of capitalism is to be expected not because American imperialism ceases to develop, but on the contrary, it is expected because American imperialism is developing and surpasses other capitalist countries in its development, which leads to an extreme extensuation of all of their antagonisms. The apex theory is the view that U.S. imperialism had reached its peak of development and would soon be brought to its knees by the weight of its own internal contradictions. We know for a fact that wasn't happening.
Still waiting on that one.
Yeah, still waiting for that. This is a lot of sit back and wait. The minority members, there were 4 conditions that need to be met. A correct perspective in the analysis of the general crisis of capitalism and American imperialism, which is part of it. 2, to place in the center of the work of the party the daily needs for the American working class. Seems pretty self-explanatory for a communist organization. 3, freeing the party from its immigrant narrowness and seclusion and making the American workers its wide basis, paying due attention to work among Negroes. And 4, liquidation of factionalism and drawing workers into the leadership. Clearly, this letter put an end to any basis for Lovestone's claim of CI support. So basically, the Comintern came down and wrote a letter that they published out and said, hey, dude, get your shit together, and here are all the things you need to do. And the people finally read that back home and were like, what is he doing? What the fuck? No, don't appreciate that. Please don't do that. So this is where we get page 296. We're about halfway through.
Oh, this is Stalin talking.
Oh, this is Stalin talking, baby. Get ready, get set. I had met Stalin before, but I doubt that the great man had remembered me from our first meeting. I was now to hear him speak for the first time. Garbed in the customary tan tunic and polished black boots, he stepped to the rostrum, informally leaning on the stand with a pipe in one hand. He began to speak in calm, measured, scarcely audible voice. Stalin emphasized 2 main points.
Stalin.
ASMR Stalin, please. Somebody give me ASMR Stalin.
I need it.
Oh my God, I'm not going to do Patreon, but I will absolutely do a private ASMR Stalin stream.
Yes.
That is how I will make all of it. Both groups are guilty of the fundamental error of exaggerating the specific features of American capitalism. You know that this exaggeration lies at the root of every opportunist error committed by both the majority and minority groups. Stalin followed this with a rhetorical question. What are the main defects in the practice of the leaders of the majority and the minority? Firstly, that in their day-to-day work, they, and particularly the leaders of the majority, are guided by motives of unprincipled factionalism and place the interests of their faction higher than the interests of the party. Secondly, that both groups, and particularly the majority, are so infected with the disease of factionalism that they base their relations with the Comintern not on the principle of confidence, but on a policy of rotten diplomacy, a policy of diplomatic intrigue. As an example, he cited the way in which both factions speculated on the existing and non-existing differences within the CPUSA, adding that they are competing with each other and chasing after each other like horses in a race. And then Stalin steps back and just does what he does. Woo! We're gonna fall back into the back and let people decide for themselves.
Sounds authoritarian.
It sounds quite authoritarian. On May 12th.
Also, welcome to the podcast, Ethan.
Yeah.
Hey, Ethan, what's going on?
Hey, I was trying to get away with like just sneaking in here.
Sneaking some comments in.
Oh, don't worry about it. You're here for halfway
Spectre
through.
haunts the podcast.
That Spectre is Ethan.
On May 12th, the last meeting of the full commission was called into session. Kusenin, as chairman, reported the findings and decisions of the subcommittee. Their report was in the form of a draft address. So again, they had a subcommittee on a committee to form a response to the American thing. You can talk about, bureaucracy, boil them down.
Bureaucracy,
ever say that they weren't fucking democratic and that they weren't fucking trying.
Yes.
They were soliciting opinion. They were getting the right line, and they were taking their damn time doing it. Addressed over the heads of the party leadership, it singled out the Lovestone faction for its sharpest attack. In this respect, it went much beyond previous criticisms, such as those in the open letter to the Sixth Convention. It now said that exceptionalism was the ideological lever of the right errors in the American Communist Party, adding that exceptionalism found its clearest exponents in the persons of comrades Pepper and Lovestone. I just love that Lovestone and Pepper are the two guys leading this party. Like that's a fun dance team if I've ever heard it. Whose conception was as follows. There is a crisis of capitalism, but not of American capitalism, a swing in the masses leftward, but not in America. There is the necessity of accentuating the struggle against reformism, but not in the United States. There is a necessity for struggling against the right danger, but not in the American Communist Party. They genuinely thought that, no, nothing applies to us. We are super
they're
special.
safe. Yeah, they're safe.
Yeah, no, nothing. And again, this is in, where are we at? 1920, late 20s right now, David?
This is 1927, I think, or 28.
27,
yeah.
okay.
27, 28. They were at this time spouting how strong American capitalism was and that you couldn't dare take on American capitalism because the economic foundation of America was so strong that it would just never break, never going to fall, never, nothing coming in the next year or so that's going to cause some moments. And then we get to Lovestone's moment of truth. And this is the last time that I will read a whole lot, but this is 2 pages of
it's Stalin.
Nothing of we will
vintage. Read 2 pages of Stalin.
This is Stalin. Here we go.
Yes.
During this part of the discussion, Stalin took the floor for the second time. In his usual calm, deliberate, ASMR-like manner, he delivered a scathing blast at the majority leaders Lovestone, Gitlow, and Bedacht? Yeah, we'll go with that.
Sounds like he was a revisionist. Who gives a shit?
He characterized the May 9th declaration as super factional and anti-party. The May 14th declaration was still more factional and anti-party than that of May 9th. Basically, what had led to this was the Lovestone. They had basically said, hey, Lovestone, you and your whole group have to come home. You have to come back. And by home, I mean USSR, because that is the motherland for everyone. You have to come back. You're not going to be allowed to lead CPUSA because you're factionalist assholes. You're going to work for the Comintern. You're going to work for the Communist International. And if you prove that you can do what we ask and that you're actually doing this in the name of world communism, then we will see about letting you back out into the world and do your thing. But this is basically your punishment. This is what we are dictating to you. And it's like we've said a couple times now. When the Communist International comes out with a line, that's the line.
Hell yeah.
Period. There is no more arguing about it because there was infinite arguing to get to that point. Yeah. You stop at that point. And Lovestone and them were like, yeah, but nah, we're not going to do that because then the party would collapse without us. We're super important, you see. Look at us. We're really great. You can't have the party without us. He called the new declaration a deceitful maneuver drawn up craftily by some sly attorney, by some petty fogging lawyer. I don't know what petty fogging is, but I am here for it, and I'm going to start using it as an insult all the time.
That's great.
On the one hand, the declaration avows complete, and this is Stalin. On the one hand, the declaration avows complete loyalty to the Comintern, the unshakable fidelity of the authors of the declaration to the Communist International. On the other hand, the declaration states that its authors cannot presume responsibility for carrying out the decision of the Presidium of the Executive Committee. If you please, on the one hand, complete loyalty. On the other hand, a refusal to carry out the decision of the Comintern. And that is called loyalty to the Comintern. What sort of loyalty is that? It's American loyalty, guys. What is the reason for this duplicity, this hypocrisy? Is it not obvious that this weighty talk of loyalty and fidelity to the Comintern is necessary to Comrade Lovestone in order to deceive the membership? It cannot be denied that our American comrades, like all communists, have the right to disagree with the draft of the decision of the Commission and have the right to oppose it. But we must put the question squarely to the members of the American delegation. When the draft assumes the force of an obligatory decision of the Comintern, do they consider themselves entitled not to submit to that decision? Are you above the law, essentially, is what they're asking. Like, why? Or like, are you better than the Comintern? Stalin then dwelt at length on the evils of factionalism, and his barbs hit us in the minority as well as the majority. He held up the American Party as an example of the havoc factionalism can wreak. He stated that so for everyone that says like Washington's speech on how parties were bad is a bit, no, fuck you. Stalin did it better. Which literally could just be I'll put that on a shirt. I'll put that on a shirt and I'm buying it because he did everything. Mustaches, hats, all things. He just did all things better.
He definitely did better at not owning slaves.
Ooh,
liquidating kulaks. I don't know Washington
Stalin
liquidating any kulaks. That did not happen.
Stalin did it better.
He stated that factionalism weakens communism, weakens the communist offensive against reformism, undermines the struggle of communism against social democracy, weakens the party spirit, it dulls the revolutionary sense, interferes with the training of the party in the spirit of a policy of principles, undermining its iron discipline, completely nullifies all positive work done in the party. He warned the majority against playing trumps with percentages and denied the claim of majority support in the U.S. party. You had a majority because the American Communist Party until now regarded you as the determined supporters of the International. But what will happen if the American workers learn that you intend to break the unity of the ranks of the Comintern? You will find yourselves completely isolated. You may be certain of that. That is Stalin going, fuck with me and see what happens.
Fuck around and find out.
Yeah, fuck around and find what? See my hand? It's where my hit be at. We will fight. Stalin's speech really struck home. This is Haywood. Stalin's speech really struck home to me. Actually, that's me too. It's just that works for everything.
Yeah.
I had been a member of a faction for the whole 5 years I'd been in the party. I had been recruited simultaneously into the party and into a faction. Thus, when Lovestone took over, I had shifted from the Ruthenberg faction to the Foster faction. But after the past month of discussion, there was no getting around the fact that factionalism had harmed the party's work. It was clear the party could not make the turn to the left, and in particular, develop the black movement without the elimination of factionalism. And that is, I think, the biggest thing that comes from this whole book is just the big, you cannot, and I don't want to, it's not big tent or anything like that, but it's, if you spend your entire time fighting other communists,
right.
The capitalists are not going to do that. They'll just kill you. They'll fight, they'll subvert, and surprisingly enough, as we'll find out later in this book as we go, they'll just fucking put spies in your midst the whole time. They'll just keep putting agents in there, agents provocateur in there to fuck with your stuff more. And Haywood talks about that, COINTELPRO, all of this stuff, even before then, they were putting, major faction leaders that were trying to antagonize, in the Communist Party were FBI agents. Like it's fucking bullshit. David, you looked like you had something to say.
That stopped being the case. Yeah. In the CPUSA.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then we get to this thing, and this is where the Americans should be fucked without just completely piss on all their graves. Breaking this, so they're leaving the party. It's 3 a.m. They're leaving this meeting at 3 a.m. And someone said, "Hey, did you see what happened between Stalin and Welsh, who was a member of the Welsh was the guy that Lovestone was trying to put in charge after he left, like his chosen crony."
Yeah, his little puppet.
His little puppet boy. And he said, "No." I said, "What happened?" It seemed on the way out, Stalin passed Welsh, who was standing in the aisle talking to Lovestone. Stalin, in a friendly gesture, because he can only make friendly gestures because he's amazing, extended his hand to Welsh as if to say, "We have our disagreements, but we're still comrades."
Aww. Love him.
Thank you. Yeah. You heard everything he just said. He was vicious. He brought it down. But at the end of the day, he still believed they were comrades.
Yeah, I mean, this is all for discipline and advancing the cause, but we're on the same side.
Stalin is being a stern daddy, but a daddy nonetheless. Welsh rudely rejected the proffered hand and in a loud voice said to Lovestone, "What the hell does that fellow want?"
Wow.
Imagine saying that to Joseph Stalin. Yeah. Get the fuck out.
Oops. Guys,
and then Stalin immediately threw him into a gulag.
Yeah,
right?
of course he got killed immediately.
I was about to say, if Stalin made people disappear, and that man was not immediately, this is proof positive that Stalin didn't just make people disappear.
Just hands up.
I would make Ethan disappear if he treated me like that. So
that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the kind of attitude that'll get you kicked out of an Arby's. Like, Joseph Stalin fucking coming at you. Like, are you kidding me?
Sir, this is an Arby's.
His attachment to Lovestone seemed to transcend any communist or political principles. I wasn't too surprised at the incident, but remembering the earlier one with Minilsky, but I was glad I hadn't seen it, and I believe that because that's one of those things where Haywood, you learn, has a bit of a temper sometimes, and I firmly believe he'd have just like dived across with like "fuck you," started wailing on which he should have. In fairness, he should have.
Yeah. But Welsh would have had some broken noses, like it would have split in two and broke twice.
But this is very highlighting of, again, there are people that are doing this because they are communists and they believe in what they're doing. And there are fucking cynical opportunists. And
yeah. Well, you know how you were talking about earlier, how like he has a habit of being like, you know, and this person, blah, 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 and then they died or they got killed or they, you know, whatever. One of the other things that happens is a lot of these folks that had these kind of quote unquote disagreements, he'll be like, you know, and 5 years later, they're selling out people to the House Un-American Activities Committee. Like the same people that did all this like shit talk, bullshit, whatever, they almost always either came out as Trotskyists or they came out and sold people out or came out and sold people out to the House Un-American Activities Committee.
No, and they were, and I mean, they came out as Trotskyists, but it almost always came to the House Un-American, because it was all they cared about was power.
Right.
And that's what he shows time and time again is anytime there's these right deviations, especially the left deviations, sometimes less so. The idealistic deviations, sometimes those are, in a lot of instances that he describes,
foolish.
I think they're just misguided. I think they're genuinely they're again, it's Trotsky. He's silly. He's not harmful. He's just silly, and get away.
You say Trotsky is not harmful?
Justin's about to cancel this podcast.
Probably the most harmful individual.
Move on.
But he doesn't have any actual power. Like he's harmful in a way that in a theoretical way, but just one strong ice axe to the back of the head and we're done. We don't have to deal with him anymore. It's so easy. It's such a soft, squishy skull.
Serious moment for a second, though. Is he, though, if people still think that Stalin was a dictator?
Yeah, I mean, he has more of an impact now than he did then, which is kind of the reality, right?
But I think that's also more of an impact of the U.S. fun U.S. propaganda, propping up the person with propping up the person with no power versus the person who had power and power given to him by the people.
Because it means that you never have to defend anything. You never have to actually try and lead a revolution because you know what? You're not there yet.
Exactly. And again, danger, definitely. I'll self-crit like a motherfucker there. Definitely. The left is dangerous. The right is dangerous in a far more cynical way.
In a more immediate way.
Yeah. The revisionists are.
And I'll still say Trotsky was probably self-serving.
Oh, are you kidding me? Of course it was. Everything was self-serving. Come on now. But the right, they didn't care who they were serving. The right would go, again, they would go House Un-American Committee, the Communist Party. Who can I grift right now? What is the easiest way for me to not have to, do something original or on my own or actually help anybody? And that's just time and time again. And then that takes care of Lovestone, and that takes care of some factionalism for a while. And they actually do get down to work. They talk about how, once we got factionalism out of the party, it was we were able to, that's when we coalesced and they were able to really get going. But then you get into what we call the purges, or they called the party cleansing.
Which is very interesting.
A very interesting change of words. And especially when you talk about, now, again, you see some of the problems because this is where we get, and I don't want to get into the page 6 or TMZ stuff in this book, because I just don't think it's, I don't think it's useful. Not to say, again, if Haywood's spouse cut out the part where there was a weird cartoon of him trying to hit up with weird.
Oh, out in Yalta there.
Yeah, out in Yalta girls.
I forgot about that.
Fine. Get that out of there.
I think that part still talked about the multinationalism and stuff.
It did, but so again, when you get to the cleansings, when you get to the party cleansing stuff, they're talking about there is some danger of, kind of in the same way you had McCarthyism, people ratting each other. Oh, well, I'm going to take my little petty bullshit that I've got against this person and rat him out as a communist to get him kicked out. You have the exact opposite kind of going on in the Soviet Union, where, okay, I'm still a bad person and I have this petty bullshit. I'm going to rat them out as not a communist. And so it was a weird dichotomy. But thankfully, Haywood says, even with all of that going on, no one from the process they describe is really interesting to me. Basically, you'd have an old, hardened member of the party. You'd have a hardline, dedicated communist come in, member of the party, and you would go up and on the lectern, hand them your party card. And then you'd have to give them like your life story, your autobiography, everything about you. Why am I here? Why am I a member of the party? What did I do before? What do I intend to do to keep helping the party? What do I think I can, what are my strengths? All of that stuff. And at the end of it, if you could defend, if that met muster, if that was satisfactory, they gave you your party card back and you moved on. And for reference, nobody in his school ever got the whole school passed. Nice. For whatever it was. And he said it was stressful. And I get that. Like there's a line somewhere later in here. We'll get to it. But, no one wanted to be kicked out of the party. Like it would have been amazingly like, can you imagine being a communist and being told you're not allowed to be a communist anymore? Like I can't imagine that. Well, I mean, I can't imagine getting to a communist party because I'm broken inside. But again, getting there and then having that gloriousness taken away from me, like, no, oh my God, like I'm gonna commit seppuku on the spot.
He's done goofed.
Yikes.
You're done goofed if you get kicked out. Yeah. I do also enjoy, and this is specifically because I know he'll listen at some point, for Rob from Dumb and Awful. Just as a point out, the only people that Haywood remembers getting caught up in the cleanses were, as I remember, a police agent was flushed out in the Polish group. So just let it be known, the Poles have always been reactionary. I stand by that sentiment.
Which one's worse, Poland or Ukraine?
Ooh, see, we have to put
Finland
in the Discord.
Can I?
Yeah.
All right. But so, again, last year in the Soviet Union, you get into, again, we're talking more about the national question. There's deviation against the national question. You have groups popping up saying that they think it's a race, that they think it's a race issue and not a national determination issue, and they want to go back on that. Sikh is the guy. I don't know if it's not spelled Sikh in the same way, so I don't want to pronounce it that way, but S-I-K. Sikh, I think he was leading this struggle.
And he talks about how this was his former professor, where under it they had open debates in class, and he kind of came more to this national question stance that he has, and then this is the person leading the struggle against it.
Yeah. And so again, back and forth on the national question, which is a lot of this book, and I think we've hit that a little bit ad nauseum, so I don't want to keep just hammering on it. But we know what the options are. Basically, in the Soviet Union, he had formulated what the options were. He got married again. We stopped that again. Then he didn't. Chapter 12, Return Home, White Chauvinism Under Fire. It starts with a poem by Langston Hughes that I think is amazing.
Yes, I love Langston. Yeah.
Put one more S in the USA to make it Soviets. Put one more S in the USA. Oh, we'll live to see it yet.
Man,
that'll be the outro.
At his House Un-American Activities trial, they brought that poem up, and he was just like, oops, sorry.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. Langston, and they talk about that too. Langston Hughes, they went over there to film a movie that they were going to try and make a movie about the black struggle, and they were going to do it in the Soviet Union, and Langston Hughes basically went to him and said, guys, this script is fucking garbage. You can't make this movie. Please don't do this. And then they just paid them all to hang out and chill in the Soviet Union for a while. Enough. And some of them ended up staying. But they didn't make the movie because apparently it was going to be garbage, according to Langston Hughes, who I trust. But we get back to America.
There's some voices I trust in this book. There's Harry Haywood. There's Big Bill Haywood. There's Langston Hughes. There's Paul Robeson. There's Du Bois at the end. Yeah.
Du Bois?
Du Bois. Shut up.
Ew.
Wait, who?
W.E.B. Du Bois?
Oh, I think he pronounced it Du Bois.
Du Bois, yeah. He was like, fuck the French.
It sounds like the wrong pronunciation, but I think it's the right pronunciation.
He was like, fuck the French.
He was like, fuck the French, Du
Bois. Okay.
Not Du Bois.
And as y'all are going through
Wretched of the Earth.
Yeah, Wretched of the Earth, yeah. As y'all are going through Wretched of the Earth, you also fuck the French, so...
Yeah, France Fanon.
Yes.
So this is the one time you can say Rojava, which is bullshit. But Du Bois, okay.
All right. So we get back to America, and turns out the 30s happened, and guys, that strong base of U.S. capitalism,
not great,
kind of wasn't as strong as anything else.
Little bit of a whoopsie,
The biggest thing out of this chapter, the one thing, and again, this was one of the times where I was just goosebumpy. Jokinen, the trial of Jokinen. So there was he was on the party payroll. He was getting paid to be a member of the Communist Party and organize.
Dream job.
And they went to this, one of the first, I know, oh God, just the dream.
Put my CV on there.
It's almost like you need to be able to pay people to do this on a professional level if they're going to be able to effectively organize, but no big deal. I'd always felt building a revolutionary movement, which meant building unity among blacks and forging alliances with white workers, was more difficult here in New York than in industrial centers such as Chicago. But the crisis of the Depression had been sort of a catalyst. Unemployed councils were built, uniting blacks and whites. Even in New York, there were marches on City Hall and movements against evictions and police brutality. So Jokinen basically, he ran a club that they were all trying to work at, or that they were all trying to organize at, and he would not let in black members into the club. It was also a pool hall and a bathhouse, and his exact rationale when they kicked the black comrades out was, I don't want to be in a bath that black people have used.
Wow.
And this is a member of the Communist Party saying this.
Wow.
And we have a minor problem there because that kind of shouldn't be a thing. Again, we talked about at the very beginning, being a member of the party doesn't make you not racist.
Cleanse.
Yeah.
Cleanse. Yeah, sorry.
So again, you want to talk about cleanse, you want to talk about purge. How did we deal with this situation?
Did we drown him in that
together,
bath?
We all got in a room, and then we put him up against the wall, and we murdered him, and we moved on.
No. Re-education camp.
No. They had a trial. They put together a trial, and they had two African-American men as the prosecutor and the defense. And they had a 14-member jury, 7 black, 7 white.
Nice.
Again, this is in 1930. So this is all inside the party. This is not part of the justice system or this is just the Communist Party. And they lined up. The arguments for expelling him were pretty obvious. He's a white chauvinist. He's deviating from the law. He is absolutely not a true comrade if he can't see past the color of a person's skin. Mm-hmm. We need to eject him from the party. It's the only way he will learn. We can't have these elements corrupting the rest of the party.
Oh yeah.
The defense from the communist lawyer that was defending him was, no, this man's been put in a position by capitalism where he fears that his livelihood will be lost if he allows blacks into his club because then his white patrons will not come. This is capitalism forcing a person into a mindset that they shouldn't have to live with and that we are trying to eradicate. Don't kick him from the party. Let him learn. Let him be a beacon in the party to show he admits why he's wrong. He admits that he's done wrong. Let him prove that. Don't kick him out, please. Ooh. Because I think the argument is he would rather be dead. I think there was some point where he's like, I would rather be, dead or lynched or something like that than be expelled from the party. Yeah, we must win him back. Expulsion from the Communist Party is worse than death at the hands of the bourgeoisie. That's how core to people's lives being a member of the party was at the time. They found him guilty. They found him guilty.
Oh,
and they kicked him out of they kicked him out of the party. So, but here's what they did. He should forthwith be expelled from the party, but might be admitted after he expiated his crime and proved his worthiness by the performance of a number of tasks. They were as follows. Go immediately to the hall, call a mass meeting, give a report of the trial, couch it in terms as to destroy white chauvinist tendencies in his club. To carry on in the club a persistent struggle for black workers and granting them admission and full privileges, including use of the pool room, bathhouse, and restaurant. Join the LSNR and sell an adequate number of copies of the Liberator, the newspaper. I don't know. That seems like a weird one, but I'm okay with it. Lead a demonstration against a certain Harlem restaurant which barred blacks. I don't know why we couldn't name it, but fine.
Yeah, call it out.
I was about to say, put
we'll
him on blast.
In 2019. I don't give a fuck.
Hey, I know, 80 years ago, you guys were.
I'll give them a 1-star Yelp review right now. Come in there and ask for their manager. I don't give a shit.
Nathan's a true revolutionary.
Yeah, to take a leading part in all of the movements and activities aimed at doing away with discrimination of any sort against the blacks. After it had been explained to Jokinen and finished, he solemnly nodded his head and said, I will do it. I did wrong in the club. The trial ended with the audience singing the international clenched fists held high.
Beautiful.
Blessings.
How I end every day.
That's how to the end of a trial, they found a man guilty, and everyone got together, held hands, and sang the international. I'm crying.
That's my dream.
I'm crying.
I dream about that every day. So
I want it so bad.
I want it so bad too.
So here and then surprisingly, he did all those things. He
Nice.
became one of the staunchest defenders of civil rights in the party.
Well, good for him.
Yeah.
He fought against the Scott. He participated in all the Scottsboro charges. He did everything that they asked of him, got readmitted back into the party, and the day after they readmitted him to the party, the U.S. revoked his citizenship and sent him back to Finland because he had never applied for full citizenship.
Damn.
Oop, they should have had that in the list of things to do.
Become a citizen.
Yeah, finish up your citizenship.
And of course, the party members went to defend him.
They did everything they could. They did everything they could to keep him in the United States, and they fell short because you can't fight City Hall when it's the FBI.
It's called character development.
Yeah, but it's. So then this highlights, I think everybody knows, again, the Scottsboro Boys trial was happening at this time, and this became a huge rallying cry for CPUSA. Surprisingly, not a huge rallying cry for another organization that's theoretically about the rights of African Americans in the United States. The NAACP refused to defend the Scottsboro Boys at all. They would not even enter into the case. They would not try and do the defense because their argument was, we defend good black people. We don't defend rapists and murderers.
Not surprised.
Which is kind of a weird thing to say at the a weird thing to say at the beginning of a trial before guilt or innocence has been decided. But cool, NAACP. Good, good look.
I mean, and when we were doing our episode on Paul Robeson, it was the same kind of thing came up with the NAACP, is that it was always, it seems like their whole thing has especially back in that time, was like trying to seek approval from white 100%. America.
It was exactly that. They wanted the assimilationist, middle class, the upstanding black. They wanted the appearances. They wanted you know what? Callback. They were Hazel. They were all Hazels. Every one of them was a Hazel. And we've already canceled. We have already canceled Hazel's ass. So NAACP, you're canceled too. Canceled. And that jumps us forward. So again, the Scottsboro Boys became kind of and this is my only analysis. I'm going out on a limb here, and I may be wrong. And if I am, shout me down. But it felt, as I read it, because it starts in this chapter and then it keeps going through every other chapter, the rest of the book for the most part. The Scottsboro Boys was one incident, but it was an inciting incident that started a very large movement across the country in places that were completely unrelated to that had no issues with that. It sparked kind of this awareness of the systemic racism that existed in the United States. And it became a place where if you had a movement, a Scottsboro Boys movement in town, the CPUSA knew it was safe to try and go organize there, that this was probably a place we could start organizing. And it feels very much like proto, in the same vein as Black Lives Matter and that sort of movement.
Yeah.
It very much mirrors that in the sense of it grew from one isolated incident, and obviously Black Lives Matter there are issues of black people being killed by the police every day, and we saw all of them come out. Same thing was happening then, though. You had when we get to Memphis a couple chapters from now, the front page is talking about a black man that was murdered in this, just cold blood murdered in the streets, and the response of the committed communists in that town were, that's Tuesday, man. Like, that just happens. So very similar in the fact that they were a rallying cry that sparked a much broader movement. But yeah, that's why Scottsboro is really important here, because it kind of sets the table for, it was the first area where the CPUSA really led the charge on black rights in America. They were not tailing behind. They were at the forefront of everything during this time. And this is the most effective time for the CPUSA when it came to, African American rights especially, and just, I think, organizing in general. And that takes us to class warfare in the mines. And guys, if there's one thing I love, it's some class warfare underground. Underground class warfare is the best kind of class warfare. Put that on a postcard.
So anyway, in the miners union, they're talking about, this is in eastern Pennsylvania and all these kind of areas, and they're talking about the National Miners Union and some of this stuff here. So let's get into the highlights where in many locals, blacks worked with recent European immigrants. In some places, the latter were even the majority. But blacks were elected to union positions, president, vice president, or secretary, because they were the only ones who could speak English. In Pricedale, however, blacks had come into the mines later. Most of them brought in as strike breakers as late as 1927. Now, this is something that's gonna come back up, and it's from earlier in the book, and we didn't really touch into it. But something that brought a lot of this organization in, and was a little reluctant to go against the white chauvinism, and a big part of this white chauvinism problem the CPUSA had was a lot of these strong unions, right? And being pro-union is good, but they were very racist, especially the AFL. Yes. And so they would shut out black people.
Supporting unionism is not socialism. It's not identical.
It's more complicated than that, but
of course it is. But that's my point is like a lot of people like with the co-op thing from Richard Wolff,
absolutely.
It's like, oh, if you support unions, that must be great.
Well, right. It's not an end in and of itself.
Right.
It's a tool.
Of course. Yeah. There's a lot of reactionary ass unions.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, sure. And then you got to be careful how to bust it, too. I mean, we talked about, what came out of that was Garveyism, which was very bourgeoisie, or in a modern thing.
The AFL-CIO is absolutely reactionary unions.
Yeah. They've been,
and they're the largest union in the United States. So,
yeah.
So kind of by definition, a little bit hard.
Yeah. And I mean, and you've got to balance that too. A modern example is like teachers unions, right? So teachers unions have certain regulations they have to for educational standards. Yeah. Well, we know, largely black people are poor. They can't buy their way into unions. And so there was a small group of black teacher or black wannabe teachers that were promoting this charter school. Originally, that was reactionary from the start. That was easy grab for reactionaries to take and just crash teachers union. Some of the most active unions, we've seen the wildcat strikes, but some of that came about from, the natural racism of the standards to get in there. So it's a complex question today, and it's a big tone of this book. But basically the idea of the mining thing is he became a leader of these unions that were very white supremacist, and he had to toggle, bringing in black interests as a black union leader. And they were kind of like one of those, hey, you're one of the good ones. And he was like, no, that's not the way this is going to go down.
Yes. And again, the biggest thing is the miners' strike. The miners' strike fails. Yeah. And why does the miners' strike fail? The miners' strike fails because they were not able to correctly identify the positions on the ground. They were not able to know that, hey, strike is good. But when we're in the middle of the Depression and capital has all the resources, strike can only hold out for so long. And when your people are literally starving to death, if you don't have an organization on the ground built up to support them and keep them alive, they're eventually going to have to go back to work, or they're going to die.
Yeah, they had no idea what tactical retreat was, or when to deploy it, or how to deploy it.
And they were giving rosy reports home instead of being honest with what the conditions were. They were trying to cover up what was going on, and that people were starting to go back to the mines, and they were trying to paint those people as they're not ideal, they're not pure. Yeah, and but it wasn't. I mean, at a certain point, no, they wanted to commit, they wanted to do this, but if you're not going to materially support people, again, this goes back to why we need a professional. This is why we need a vanguard. It's why you need a professional revolutionary party. If people cannot have the Black Panthers knew this better than anybody. If you don't meet people's material needs, they are not going to be able to do revolutionary work.
Right,
they're just not.
Yeah, but you can't do that if everybody in your movement's working 60 hours a week.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to this, right? Dying for the cause is a thing, and you die for the cause. That's charging in and making a sacrifice of yourself in battle. It's not starving in the name of not being a scab.
Right.
At some point, you've got to be able to handle this stuff.
Yeah, and then we go back to Russia. Because yes, of course we do. We have to.
Yes,
you got to go back. Got to go back to Russia. So again, we go back to Moscow. He's trying to. They needed a delegate to the party conference, and this is a big, giant episode that is basically them debating the national question again. Because it's super important. It's important, but again, they really are just getting down to. There was a debate on the line. There were some people that thought it was the race issue. There were some people that thought there should be self-determination. As we know. Self-determination was the line. That's the line that won out. But there were still factional infighting that kind of caused an issue. He tried to bring his wife back to the U.S. Turns out one more time to cancel Hazel, because if there's one villain of this story, it's Hazel.
Hazel.
Oh my gosh.
Fuck Hazel. Hazel left. He wanted to go back. They couldn't get divorce paperwork because Hazel said that her church doesn't approve of divorces. So she left Haywood, got married to someone else, had kids, but never got divorced because the church wouldn't approve of it.
Hazel, come on.
And so he had to leave his lovely Russian wife Inya back in Russia, and then he never heard from her again.
Sad.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, big same though.
Yeah, sorry. Alex has also left their Russian wife back in the Soviet Union.
sad.
Yeah. And then we get possibly the best title again. The chapter titles are good, but chapter 15, sharecroppers with guns. Organizing the Black
Hell
Belt.
yeah.
Getting that as a tattoo.
Oh, I think I saw that over the summer.
Yeah. I mean,
He's got a few bullet holes.
It's a great
just
band.
good. But this again, and trying to get through it, this was the first time that Haywood went to the Black Belt, to the Deep South, to try and organize, because we're organizing in New York and Chicago, and the mine strike was in Pittsburgh. Organizing in the North and organizing in the South are wildly different. And so he wanted that. He was a little kind of nervous of it for obvious reasons, but he wanted to go try out the line in the South and see how it worked with the masses. And turned out the masses were there for it. But you run into this minor problem of wild Jim Crow racism. Kind of makes it hard to do reformist reformist kind of policies when one side is allowed to indiscriminately murder you and the other side isn't seen as people. Yeah. That is a hard ass struggle, and I can't even get my head around it still. I think, I mean, reading through all of this, they were driving a citizen of the free United States of America down in a convertible in the back underneath the seat so that he wasn't seen by townspeople as they drive through Mississippi and stuff like that. It's insane. It's incredibly hard to even imagine that fear in your day-to-day life.
It's his reality.
And so it is. And when this is, again, at the same time that the United States is trying to make the Soviet Union out to be some sort of hellscape dystopia, and it just is so great. It's such cognitive dissonance for me to hear that and then know that this is the truth that these people were living. It's very sad. This is the beginning of the sad turn, guys. I don't know if you've read.
This is also where Browder is introduced.
Yeah,
but there was a good barb in there about the KKK virtually being an arm of the state.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep. No. Absolutely. And you see, I mean, people they're talking about people he met in the South, and this is where I don't want to get bogged down in like the name stuff like that. Again, read this book, everybody. Like this is if we hadn't done this, I'm still considering at some level going back and rereading
Doing
this
this?
whole
Okay.
doing
If
this.
you guys,
doing
if
this
you guys
book.
do like
You should do this
100 episodes on this book, that'd be dope.
Honest to God, I'm considering.
We'll start it in the year 2023 and we'll end it in the year 2056.
That is the great thing about our podcast is it will never end, because I mean there's just I can just read a book, like it's not that hard, and it will at the rate we're slowing down, it took us like 27 episodes or like 17 episodes to do Capital, and that was like 800 pages, and it's taking us like 37 episodes to do 14 pages of Fanon for some reason. So,
that's the thing. If you went back right now and did Capital again, it'd be like thousands of episodes.
If we did Capital the same way, I think it's the difference of if you do Capital the same. This book.
Yeah, Capital also has like 20 pages of coats and linen.
Every word of Fanon feels important, and the same way
absolutely.
every word. It's Haywood, and I say that to say this book feels the same way. I understand. I know that the way we're doing this is different from how you guys even normally do your show, and definitely different than how we do our show. But this is a book that literally every single word that gets read in here is important because of the way it ties the whole narrative together. So when we skip stuff, it's not because it's a
great book. It's not just a good book. It is one of the best
fantastic
books.
It is the outside of State and Rev. This is the most important and impactful book I've ever read as a communist.
Wow.
So we move on to chapter 16. They're preparing for battle, the eighth convention of the CPUSA, and this is where we're starting. So the economic crisis has passed. You've hit the down of the depression where everything is just basically shit all the time, and everyone suddenly starts looking at Roosevelt as like some sort of savior.
This
is a mistake.
This
like
is
the
Bernie.
New Deal
This
saved
is
us
what
all.
happens if Bernie gets elected.
Yes. This is exactly what happens if we hit a depression in the next like 6 months and then Bernie wins.
Yes.
This will be like year 3 of Bernie's presidency. Yes, as we will start looking at him as Savior Bernie and all of that kind of shit, and it'll be completely, just divorced from material facts and reality. But it'll be what it is. So in the 8th convention of the CPUSA, again, we're getting into it's back and forth factional bullshit. And again, I don't think it's unimportant, but
it's not.
We know
it's very interesting, but it's not relevant to this episode, right? Interesting to what, because the history of the CPUSA is very interesting.
Yeah, it's complicated,
but it has no real major relevance to this episode.
But this sentence does from Stalin. So as Stalin said when he was dealing with a similar controversy considering Russian chauvinism and local nationalism in the Soviet Union, it would be foolish to attempt to give ready-made recipes suitable for all times and for all conditions as regards the chief and the lesser danger. Such recipes do not exist. The chief danger is deviation against which we have ceased to fight, thereby allowing it to grow into a danger to the state. The fact that white chauvinism was the main danger by no means implied that bourgeois nationalism under certain conditions could not be the main danger in a particular situation in the development of our work among blacks. No one could deny that this was the situation that developed in St. Louis. Woo woo, shout out. And in Harlem. Our experience in these situations shows that the bourgeois nationalism, if not fought, could become the main obstacle to advancing our work among blacks. So again, just Stalin, they're talking about, because this whole thing is arguing over, well, what's the most important thing? What's the thing we have to be fighting right now? Is it nationalism? Is it chauvinism? Is it what is it? And the answer is it's all of it. And you fight it individually, but you don't just say it's not. It's because if you make it where no, it's absolutely not nationalism, it's definitely chauvinism. Nationalism is good, actually, kind of, and then you backdoor your way into bad stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you don't just go white chauvinism. Problem solved.
Problem solved. Chapter 17, Chicago. Against war and fascism. Guys, we don't like fascism. So we're getting to the point where Italy's about to invade Ethiopia. The CPUSA is at the front of trying to lead that fight against you invading, against, Mussolini doing Mussolini things. He's sneaky Mussolini. He just sneaks into power. No one expects it coming.
Sneaky Mussolini.
There's a small subgroup of people that play Hearts of Iron 4 that are going to get this reference, and everybody else, I'm sorry.
All of them are in our Discord.
Yes. Don't cut this. Those people need that. But again, you're trying, and so again, you see when the threat of fascism starts rising up, you see everyone kind of getting on the same page, but you also see the opportunists coming out of the woodwork because they recognize that everything kind of gets the blinders put on it when you go to war, and CPUSA used that as an attempt for Browder to really consolidate power, go into the start planting the seeds for what was to come. And I literally don't think I highlighted almost anything in that entire chapter because holy shit, it was just a lot of lead up to that.
Well, there's a lot of seeds planted about Ford and Browder and Ford, it being, Browder's kind of big black representative that was going to undermine everything
we're not talking about Henry Ford. We're talking about some Ford guy from the CPUSA that nobody, you don't have to know him. It's okay. Spanish Civil War.
Well, hold on. One last thing about that though is we do want to mention in the chapter. We do want to mention in the chapter. It's important because it goes back and forth about how they have the hands-off Ethiopia marches and they get bullied really hard by the Chicago police.
Yeah. Hey guys, turns out the CPD sucks dick. Not sure if you're aware. The guys that murdered Fred Hampton, not a cool group of dudes.
Yeah,
he talks about getting arrested.
Death to them.
Death to them.
Yeah.
Simple.
I mean, he talks about like people getting mass arrested in these protests and running through gauntlets and all kinds of mess.
Yeah.
But
it was a very good protest. They did what they needed to, it was a well organized protest and they got their message out there. But a lot of people he got crippled, I think, to a certain extent where he couldn't walk for like 3 days because of the beating he took to his legs. Which was super great.
But leading up to that, how they got that like that was really fun because they actually had the police had it where like 1,000 of them were there to shut down a march. They could not get their march of 10,000 people through town. And so what they did is they had different buildings and they took turns running up to the top of the building and shouting out on the megaphone. And then the police come and like beat that guy and take him down. Someone across the street was on a building shouting in a megaphone.
They turned it into protester whack-a-mole. It was really fun. It turns out it's an effective strategy.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to Spain, guys.
Now we're going to Spain.
Before we get to Spain, though, I just want to talk about in the Browder's Treachery chapter.
God damn
he mentions Haywood mentions he talks a lot about Paul Robeson, and the reason I bring him up is because we did an episode on him, and I love him.
We love him.
He's a beautiful,
so much.
beautiful man. But he talks about so in 1948, Harry Haywood released his book Negro Liberation, and he says the way he was able to do that in the book, he says, Paul Robeson was more than willing to subsidize me and like gave him hundreds of dollars a month to write, like, so he could write this book and just like focus on writing the book because of Paul Robeson. So like, again, Paul Robeson, blessed.
Love him.
Beautiful
Rest
man.
in peace. Love you.
We love him.
Yeah.
Anyway, now we can go to Spain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And it will come
Let's
up later.
talk about how
Robeson
the
does that again.
Trotskyists are wrong.
Always.
I mean, if we haven't already,
We have. What about
So here's the
George
thing.
Orwell?
Here's the thing about Spain, and this is this is actually really weird because as much as I got to this chapter and I got really excited because the Spanish Civil War, I wonder what this is where it all starts kind of falling apart for me at least, because this is where Haywood does not have. We know what happens in the Spanish Civil War. It doesn't. We don't win it. And we don't win it in large part because there was backing.
They weren't ready to win it. They were not ready to win it.
Removed.
It's his fault.
You were getting absolute support from Germany, from Hitler and from Mussolini, and the West refused to do anything to try and help Spain.
Right.
Nothing at all. I mean, so you have the full Axis force essentially aligned trying to push Spain over.
The Soviet Union tried to help, and then they were this is dumb.
Yeah.
There was no, again, when if the Soviet Union is the only one that are going to support them and Germany is sitting there staring down at them, ready to come fucking murk them, it's like, if the rest of the West is not going to raise a finger to stop this, no, at a certain point you can't. And it was, this is where a lot of go, David.
Oh, I was going to say, and there's also, the issues where like the generals and things, and Harry Haywood was in a non-zero amount of wars. And at some point he knows what's going on there.
I mean, the number's 3, but fine. I mean, you can put it at none. You're technically correct. I just don't understand the hedge.
Well, we're all at 0, so.
Yeah. So
it's 3 more than most of us.
So he would see this.
Don't tell me. Like, I've been in the gamer wars, man. I don't want to hear it. I've seen it for a month.
What about the war on Christmas? We're all soldiers.
We saw this first. He saw this firsthand. And was like, why are we charging people into their death here? What kind of incompetent leadership do we have? And so, you also had that factor in Spain where it was like just absolutely idiotic leadership.
Yeah, there was no real good organization there.
Yeah.
And this is where you start getting, again, this is a lot of the page 6 TMZ nonsense of the book, because the biggest issue of this whole,
so funny.
The biggest issue of this whole incident is essentially that Haywood pushed and he admitted it, he pushed too hard for improvements for troops and stuff like that. And he clashed with the leadership. He clashed with the generals. The generals then blacklisted him, made him persona non grata and undermined his authority. The cool thing that happened there was I was really impressed with the fact that his job, like the political commissar job, which basically his whole job was he was to run parallel to the military leadership, but his whole job was to be to the troops, to be to the masses, to be kind of to explain to them why we're doing what we're doing. Why is this part? Why should you be part of this struggle? Here's what I'm doing to make sure that you're taken care of and that your needs are met. So you had the generals kind of leading the practical military applications, but then you had a political commissar assigned to all of them to relate to them why the struggle is important and why we're here and why it's important. And I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah. But other than that, it really just breaks down to, the Spanish Civil War, he left. He had to leave. He got undermined so badly that he was forced to leave the front and come back to America. And it's now that leads to a lot of bad juju later in the book.
Yeah, and even among that, I mean, looking at the Spanish Civil War itself, you have the what do you talk about? The Trotskyist POUM was made like Communes of Aragon or something was like all put in charge.
Yeah, there was a whole thing with the Communes of Aragon where basically they were so committed to being independent and doing whatever they wanted that they got it. They wouldn't organize with anyone else. They got their asses overrun, and then that kind of broke the line and everything fell apart.
Yeah, it was the Trotskyists were like, we do it best, and you guys all suck, and that fucked everything up.
Oh, also, if you want to know again why, with fascists and the communists are the same. Here's a fun little clip. What had happened? He had come back from they'd seen kind of a battleground, the bodies of women and children lying in the road. Trigger warning for anyone.
I like how you said that after you said the
Well, we have the glories of editing. You guys don't get trigger warnings.
You're too much. You're too much.
Extra.
What had happened? A group of fascists fleeing the town had seized women and children as hostages, forcing them to march in front of them as a shield against British fire.
Oh my God.
Passing the British, they suddenly opened fire and threw grenades, shoving the hostages aside as they rushed down the road. The British, caught off guard by this ruse, tried to defend themselves, but to avoid shooting women and children, they were unable to effectively reply and took many casualties as a number of fascists escaped. So again, the Allied forces, not wanting to murder women and children, were unable to fight, and the fascists had no problem throwing them into a hail of bullets so that they could escape with their skin.
Insane.
Hey, spoiler! We're moving on to another war, guys. It's World War II this time. One, joining the merchant, I didn't realize the merchant marines at the time were like a civilian union fighting force. Like that was a cool thing I learned that I didn't know about. And so they had it was like a union boat where like everything was organized almost like the party would be, and you had your disputes resolved and all sorts of fun stuff. But that, whatever. But World War II, with its beginning in the fascist invasion of Ethiopia, China, and Spain, broke out in earnest with Hitler's blitzkrieg of Poland in 1939. The imperialist governments of France, Britain, and the U.S., which had been following a policy of appeasement towards the building up of the German war machine in the hopes of using it in an armed invasion of the Soviet Union, now found themselves threatened. Their schemes against the Soviets had been shaken by the non-aggression pact signed by the Soviets with the Germans in 1939. The Soviets signed up with the Nazis. They're the bad
Red-Brown
guys.
Alliance. Justin, we're going to have to do a World War II episode at some point.
Like a 5-part series.
It's just debunking World War II,
the World War
anti-Soviet myths. Yeah.
Proles of the Great Patriotic Wars. That's
Allies of the Roundtable. There we go.
But then it shows again. So you get down, the Soviet policy had been consistently urged joint action against fascist aggression. So the Soviets are like, hey guys, can we stop this? And the Allies are like, no, we'd prefer they run your ass over. That would be nice. And then we don't have to because we know we'd lose. The Soviets offered to defend Czechoslovakia. The French refused to put their mutual defense pact into effect. The Soviets offered to defend Poland on the eve of the German invasion. Poland refused to allow the Red Army units to cross the border. Back to Poland just sucking. The British stubbornly refused any type of mutual assistance pact with the Soviet Union, hoping all the time for war between Germany and Russia. The Soviets thus moved to defend themselves and thwart this imperialist scheme, signing the non-aggression pact with Germany, a brilliant and necessary diplomatic move.
Shocking.
Again, this was not they were aligned with the Nazis because they liked the Nazis. It's you all would like the Nazis to kill us, and we don't want to die right now, please.
Yeah.
We're gonna do this to stall until we have enough time to go kill some Nazis that you don't want to bother killing. And now is where we go on the pleasure cruise part. Now is when he gets on this is where we go on like a 75-page jaunt through the Merchant Marines where, we're sailing I mean, basically, if you could just play like in the Navy to a montage of boats going all over the world on a map, that would be what we're doing right now. The only part of this that I will read is our next port was Noumea, New Caledonia, a French possession about 800 miles east of Australia, which had been formerly a penal colony. The New Caledonians were Melanesians, big, fine-looking blacks with woolly hair. My interest in anthropology had led me to read extensively about these Asian Negroes, and I was glad to have the opportunity to meet them firsthand. So there's your tie-in from last week.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I looked at that, I was like, yay! But yeah, then literally the rest of it is there's fights on the boat, there's people that don't agree on the boat, some people are running gambling rings on the boat. How do we handle this? It's all important. Read the book, but not really relevant to what we're talking about here.
Yes. There's a little bit about South Africa, but I think we're familiar with apartheid and how things were
apartheid bad.
Yeah.
Apartheid, very bad. At one of the conventions, we did skip it, so I apologize, David. At one of the conventions, when they were talking about the decolonial question, the South African delegation came forward to have their speech, and the South African delegation was represented by 3 white people, and their main concern was, so they're saying, like, whites to the sea is their slogan. What are you guys going to do for the white people in South Africa? And the Communist International is, what the fuck are you guys going to do? Get out of their way. It's their land. Fuck off. And that was fun. There's one more thing in the Merchant Marines section, because again, it goes back to this explaining how pogroms and all that. But he told me a year ago a black seaman had been killed right there in Murmansk. He goes back to Russia on the boat. Do black people always have to fear for their lives in the United States? He asked, puzzled. Well, one can expect attack at any time, but not all whites are hostile, and blacks have their own communities. He seemed puzzled by this whole thing and said, I guess it's like the Jews under the old regime. Precisely, I agreed. Oof. So again, and then we kind of get towards the back, and the back is, again, we've got notes for all of this. Read the book because it's very fascinating.
It's a 700-page book. We can't cover it in 2.5 hours.
Just wait for Marx Madness's 40 episodes on.
It'll happen. It'll happen. I'll do it. Don't threaten me with a good time. But what ends up happening is essentially Browder takes over the Communist Party and decides that they should. I think the most striking thing is he decides to liquidate the party. He literally comes out and says, and this is not an exaggeration, that the 2-party system is fine. We are best served as an advisory, like an advisory group, an association group underneath that 2-party system, like the DSA. No big deal.
Called out.
Yeah, no, not. Yeah, that's the nicest thing we'll say about the DSA tonight. They should be an advisory group and work within, and that electoralism is the way to socialism. Literally, the Communist Party of the USA came out with the line of electoralism is the way we should do this. We shouldn't be aligning with this. Let's align with the NAACP, and that's how we're going to achieve our goals. He literally voted to liquidate the party overnight. They had to have an emergency session to rebring it back together. But for the rest of the group, it fell apart into that in and of itself. The opportunism was there. And so slowly but surely the party got reconstituted, but the same kind of people that supported the move to liquidate the party were put in charge, and now they keep going and it keeps dragging on. And the party died a death of 1,000 cuts from people not addressing people were kept claiming that the left sectarianism was the real root of all problems, that if the damn tankies would just shut up. By the way, left sectarianism is absolutely 1930s talk for tanky. That's all it is, as far as I can tell, because that's exactly, they use it the exact same way. It's the communist I don't like, because that's all the fuck it is.
And the party from there on out was very anti-international and was,
if you need to understand like left sectarianism and what constitutes something that you should work against versus what is just sectarianism, go back to the Stalin speech from 7 chapters ago or whatever.
From an hour and a half ago.
Yeah. But currently, and so this goes first. It's Browder liquidates it, and then Foster revives it. But it's the exact same lines. They're kind of tailing the Wallace election a little bit in some parts here.
Yeah, very much so.
And then the NMU, the
National Maritime Union. This is the organization that when he went on the Merchant Marines and was fighting in World War II. That's the organization it was a part of, and that organization is suddenly going from much more revolutionary than even the CPUSA, which is kind of sad to the CPUSA, to running in the exact same veins from Curran, I guess is his name. Yeah, Curranism. C-U-R-R-A-N-O.
Yeah, Joseph Curran. And so it's very anti-communist. It might as well be the House Un-American Committees. And so he talks about he goes back on a ship to rejoin the NMU because he needs work. He's kicked out of the Communist Party. The party's dissolving left and right. There's nothing he can do. And you can't exactly get work when everybody knows you're a famous communist. So he's getting very unstable, short-lived waiting jobs. And so finally he joins back on the NMU, and he's in the ships, and he's hearing guys like rip on communists, and he's just like shutting his mouth because he's got no power at this point.
Yeah, right. It just when you took the party apparatus away, all of the ability to organize, all of the fights that they had won, everything got taken back.
Yes,
and again, it showed Haywood's his inability, such a powerful thinker and such a powerful organizer and activist. The fact that he basically had to go underground, flee to Mexico, live out his life in Mexico City, where he was being followed around by FBI. I mean, there's a section where there were FBI agents that would essentially tail him to the subway and just yell stuff, oh, thank you for like they were trying to get him to turn. Yeah. They were trying to get him to go against the party. And so he just had to flee, lives out the rest of his life in isolation, out of the party, unable to do anything. And I think that it underlines so forcefully why you are not going to do this without a party behind. The second the party was removed as an organization, all of that work started falling apart. The Sharecroppers Union dissolved. All of these other organizations fell to the wayside. So the ever deepening crisis and the increased threat of war between the two superpowers, this was U.S. and Russia, are affecting the living conditions of the broad masses of the American people. At the same time, the ability of the imperialists and the labor aristocracy to grant concessions and thus buy off dissent has been somewhat hampered by that crisis. Under such conditions, with the leadership of a new party, there is a strong possibility of building a movement based on the alliance between blacks and other nationalities of the working class. As Chairman Mao wrote in 1968, the struggle of the black people in the United States is bound to merge with the American workers' movement, and this will eventually end the criminal rule of the U.S. monopoly capitalist class. I hope that this book, which sums up some of my experiences and that of many other comrades, will make some contribution to this lofty goal.
Haywood, like one of the best humans that ever walked the fucking planet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, it is as high a bar as I can set. Mm-hmm. It is the only thing I would put up on the same tier as State and Revolution. It is that front to back. It is that important. There are so many parts of this book, and the fact
there are even. I mean, we kind of had to because there's such a block idea, and we're doing an overview. Yeah. I don't feel like we just yada yada the last 4 chapters.
We did,
but we did. But I mean, there are some really good key things even in there.
There's great stuff the whole time.
Little nuggets about
you should
white
read this
chauvinism.
You should read this book.
You should absolutely. And if the second it becomes accessible in a format that is not double scanned,
very soon,
we will get it.
PDF, yes. Get this book. Submit a slogan just so you can get one of the hardcover copies because they're fucking fantastic, especially with the books with the pictures in the middle. The pictures are fantastic.
Yeah,
just
they're
the whole fucking thing is amazing.
We'll include those in our version.
Yes. So thanks so much to Marx Madness for coming on tonight, and thank you so much to everyone for listening. Some suggested reading will be in the show notes, and the only suggested reading is
Black Bolshevik. We'll have a link. We'll have a link to PDF.
Coming to
PDF. You can find Marx Madness online anywhere if you Google Marx Madness.
You should see Justin's facial expression. Like, what the fuck are you asking?
I don't know why I'm reading this. So, our sponsors are all the excellent fans on Patreon. As always, we have way too many to read now. So, since the last time we recorded, these are the new ones. Aaron Austin, Bosif Ballin, Bradley, Chris, Comrade Killinen, Corinne, Derica, Dixieland of the Proletariat, which is also a podcast. You should go listen.
Oh shit.
Dominique, Donald, F. That's the name. The letter F. Yep. Gassam, Harold, the infamous AK, which is a great weapon. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Jim, Joseph, Justin, not me, Kyler, Michael, Proly McProleface, PSI, Queer Antifa, Critical Sport, Riley, Ryan, Steven, Tanuami, Tanner, Tiago, Tradical Wife has some great art. Like, go check that out. Yep. Yeah. Unbuttered toast. That's no support for unbuttered toast. Like, go butter your fucking toast.
I can't even give critical support there now.
And Will. All of these people are inspiring and revolutionary and make it easier for us to make this podcast for you and have it sound good. We've got like 8 mics and like a studio with some bullshit. Yeah. So it better sound good.
Bullshit. You have a picture of Lenin on the goddamn wall. You have a studio with amazing things.
It's a metal
It's a metal bust. Get the fuck out of here. We've established what we're calling the USSP with several satellite podcasts, and we've started centralizing links on the various feeds on our website. Check it out.
Sounds authoritarian.
And we'd also like to thank Ransom Notes for our intro music, which is a banger. Check him out on SoundCloud. Don't forget to rate and review. Visit prolespod.com and submit your submissions for the...
Submit your submissions.
Hell yeah.
For the
wow.
Yeah, for the slogan.
Yeah.
For this podcast, so you can get a free copy of this amazing book. Anyway, like us on Facebook.com/ProlesPod. Follow us on Twitter @ProlesPod. If you have any feedback, topic ideas, or suggestions, we'll throw them in the ignore box. Feel free to send them to send us an email at ProlesPod or in the comment box on our website. Thank you for tuning in, and solidarity forever.
Love you.
Bye.
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 United forever in friendship and labor, our mighty republics will ever endure. The great Soviet Union will live through the ages, the dream of a people, their fortress secure. Long live our Soviet motherland, built by the people's mighty hand. Long live our people, united and free, strong in a friendship tried by fire. Long may our crimson flag inspire, shining in glory for all men to see. Through days dark and stormy, while great Lenin led us, our eyes saw the bright sun of freedom above, and Stalin, our leader, with faith in the people, inspired us to build the land that we love. For the future, destroyed the invader, and brought to our homeland the laurels of fame. Our glory will live in the memory of nations, and all generations will honor her name. Long live our Soviet motherland, built by the people's mighty hand. Long live her people, united and free, strong in a friendship tried by fire. Long may our crimson flag inspire.